A terrifying red dragon surrounded by raging flames looms over a burning fantasy world. A lone swordsman stands with a glowing lightning blade before a burning magic academy. This warrior trains relentlessly, mastering powerful elemental abilities across many brutal battles. He fights through dangerous monsters and rescues his companions during epic academy quests. Armed with a shining golden sword, he charges forward to overcome every obstacle. He endures countless deadly crises to finally complete his heroic journey. The hero raises his glowing blade as he reaches the game's final victory. He firmly grips the sword, marking the complete end of the long storyline. Digital particles swirl around a player's hands right after finishing the game. Suddenly, a glass window violently shatters on a dark and stormy night. Bright, magical explosions illuminate the dark exterior of the academy building in the rain. Powerful energy blasts continue bursting through the windows as a battle rages inside. A young female student delivers a glowing strike toward an enemy on the floor. A warrior swings a brilliant, magic-infused sword with overwhelming force. A terrified student cowers in fear against the wall as the chaos unfolds. A fierce, red-haired girl angrily unleashes a devastating wave of fire magic. A massive magical explosion detonates, engulfing the hall in blinding light. Intense bursts of fire and magical energy rip through the room. A roaring blaze sweeps across the entire floor. Leo stands, bruised and bloodied, glaring ahead with glowing determination. Covered in wounds, he grips his weapon tightly and prepares for what comes next. Leo swings his blazing greatsword forward with intense focus and determination. He shouts loudly as he dashes directly through the surrounding flames. Nearby, a battered and bloody hand grips a wooden bow tightly. Ed takes careful aim, pulling the bowstring back with steady concentration. He lets the arrow fly with powerful force toward his target. A massive magic circle ignites into a storm of roaring red fire. A mad mage commands destructive spells while a quiet girl watches silently. She remains seated in the shadows as strange magical energy swirls around. Suddenly, a witch in a pointed hat channels overwhelming purple lightning. Lucy stands calmly as crackling purple energy envelops her entire body. She unleashes a colossal magical dragon that roars with immense power. The enormous magical dragon unleashes overwhelming purple energy across the entire battlefield. The massive blast completely devastates the area, knocking out dozens of armored guards. Defeated soldiers and broken weapons lie scattered across the smoking ground. Meanwhile, Leo fiercely clashes his flaming sword against his opponent's weapon. Leo presses the attack with powerful fiery swings, pushing his enemy backward. A dark, menacing presence suddenly gathers in the shadows nearby. Sinister energy swirls as another dangerous foe prepares to strike. A malevolent figure with glowing purple eyes flashes a cruel, confident smirk. Flashing back, a grand chandelier hangs inside a quiet, lavish room. Warm light fills the elegant chamber as the scene shifts to the past. Ed sits alone on a couch, quietly pondering his sudden new reality. An official letter lists the severe offenses that caused his noble family to disown him. Ed clutches his face in frustration, struggling to accept the harsh reality of his situation. He looks down at the official notice confirming his complete disgrace and expulsion. Soon after, he's sent away to face the consequences at the academy dormitories. Staff members toss Ed and all of his belongings out onto the cold stone ground. The tall academy dorms tower over him under the bright daytime sky. Inside the halls, other students whisper and mock him for being disowned and expelled. Ed sits slumped on a bench beside his luggage, surrounded by total despair. He grips his head in agony as the nightmare of his new life sinks in. In his previous life, he was just a regular guy sitting before a glowing computer screen. He had spent countless hours mastering the hit fantasy game set in this very magic academy. The game was packed with powerful heroes, deadly rivals, and dangerous magical forces. Among all the formidable villains stood Ed, the pathetic minor antagonist he now inhabited. Ed recalls that his wealthy noble family completely disowned him and cut off all financial support. In the original game, the evil Ed was filled with useless hatred and wanted revenge. Outside the dorms, Ed angrily shouts back at the students who are mocking him. He clenches his fists and throws an embarrassing tantrum on the walkway. The surrounding students only point and laugh harder at his ridiculous behavior. Feeling completely humiliated, Ed slumps down on a bench and shrinks in shame. He calms down and decides to check his current abilities in this new world. A floating blue game menu appears right above his reflection in a mirror. Ed stares at his reflection, feeling nervous about his terrible starting situation. His combat and magic stats are so low that he is basically helpless. He remembers that Ed was designed only as a weak, cowardly opening act villain. In the game's prologue, the hero easily defeated Ed to protect a girl. Ed narrows his eyes, determined to survive despite his terrible starting stats. Outside the Grand Academy dormitories, a bright new morning begins. A hand firmly grips the handle of a packed leather suitcase. Dressed in his uniform, Ed steps outside, ready to face his new reality. Carrying his heavy luggage, he leaves the student dorms behind. The vast academy spans across a huge, scenic coastal island. Sunlight filters through the thick trees of a nearby forest. Exhausted from dragging his heavy bags, Ed sits down in the woods to catch his breath.
Ed lowers his head and thinks carefully about his difficult new situation. He recalls being kicked out of the dorms into the pouring rain. Graduating from this prestigious magic academy guarantees a very successful future. Staying enrolled at this massive school is his best path forward. A diploma promises wealth and comfort beyond his wildest dreams. Using a stick, he writes his ultimate goal in the dirt, graduating. With glowing eyes, Ed fills himself with fierce determination to succeed. However, his disappointingly low-status screen quickly brings him back to reality. Before thinking about school, he must secure basic food, clothing, and shelter.
He clicks open the latch on his large brown suitcase. Inside, he finds useless luxury clothes and a decorative dagger with no stat boosts. His fancy luggage only contains ornamental trinkets that offer no help for wilderness survival. Ed sits on the forest path beside his open luggage, realizing finding work will be nearly impossible. A calm, rocky stream flows quietly through the wilderness nearby. Deciding to rely on himself, Ed stretches his arms and gets ready to work. He casts several wind spells into the trees to chop down timber. The magic completely drains his low stamina, causing him to collapse to his knees in exhaustion. Sweating heavily and gasping for breath, Ed feels the harsh limits of his weak body. Despite his extreme fatigue, he stays determined to do whatever it takes to survive. He catches his breath and inspects the shattered wooden logs lying on the ground. Using a small fire spell, Ed boils a chunk of tree bark inside a container. The piece of wood steams on a skewer after being cooked over the flame. Ed grips the stick firmly as he prepares to taste his improvised wilderness food. Starving and having no other supplies, Ed opens his mouth to eat the boiled bark. Ed eagerly tries eating the boiled tree bark to satisfy his hunger. The awful taste immediately turns his stomach, making him throw up violently. He continues gagging uncontrollably from the disgusting meal. The harsh reality shows that his first survival meal was a complete failure. Looking pale and exhausted, Ed carries a bundle of long wooden poles. He drops the heavy wooden poles onto the ground in the forest clearing. He tries pushing the logs into the soil to stand them up. Ed strains with all his strength to keep the leaning poles balanced together. The heavy poles slip and collapse right on top of him. Refusing to give up, Ed grits his teeth and tries again. He tightly ties the top of the standing poles together using a strap. He finally manages to erect a sturdy tripod frame for his shelter. Completely exhausted and starving, Ed struggles to catch his breath after working so hard. He tosses his spare clothes inside the shelter frame to serve as makeshift bedding. Ed continues working tirelessly through the entire night under the bright full moon. The morning sun rises above the forest canopy as birds begin to chirp. By dawn, a sturdy wooden shelter covered in leafy branches is finally complete. Ed collapses onto the ground, proudly admiring the solid hut he spent all night building. Suddenly, a glowing blue system notification flashes right in front of his eyes. The status window reveals that his hard work has leveled up his handicraft skill to level 4. Ed sits down to massage his aching feet while his empty stomach growls loudly. He smiles warmly, feeling genuinely rewarded by the quick progress in his crafting abilities. His stomach roars violently again, reminding him that finding real food is now urgent. To start hunting, he crafts a makeshift harpoon by tying his dagger onto a sturdy branch. Determined to get a real meal, Ed raises his harpoon high with intense focus. He plants his feet firmly on the ground, ready to strike into the water. Ed repeatedly thrusts his makeshift spear into the flowing stream with rapid speed. His effort pays off as 2 fresh fish flip out of the river. Ed joyfully builds a crackling campfire to cook his newly caught meal. He roasts the fresh fish over the flames until they are cooked to perfection. Starving and overjoyed, Ed takes a hot, delicious bite of the grilled fish. Suddenly, a lock of shiny blonde hair catches the sunlight nearby. Ed looks up in shock, clutching the warm fish in his hands. An elegant blonde girl in a flowing white dress stands right before him. Ed freezes mid-bite as the graceful stranger quietly looks down at him. A sudden memory of the royal princess flashes into Ed's mind. Ed recalls being forced onto his knees by royal guards during his expulsion hearing. Princess Phoenia stood before him with crossed arms, harshly scolding his complete lack of remorse. She coldly ordered him to pack his belongings and leave the Magic Academy for good. Her glowing eyes flared with anger and disgust as she judged his shameful actions. She refused to show him any mercy, completely sick of his continuous wicked schemes. Earlier, Ed had caused chaos at the academy until Leo stepped in to protect other students. The original villain Ed had greedily schemed in secret to sabotage his fellow classmates. However, Princess Phoenia suddenly appeared in the doorway and caught him in the act. She glared at him with icy contempt, ready to expose his dark deceit. Phoenia activated her unique magical ability, Insightful Eyes, to weigh his guilt. A glowing scale of justice appeared in her eye, laying all of his lies completely bare. With his dirty tricks fully exposed, the original Ed panicked and screamed in pure terror. The memory ends with Ed getting thrown out of the academy gates with his luggage. Back in the present, Princess Phoenia angrily confronts Ed in the forest. She stands firm and prepares to deliver another harsh lecture. Ed awkwardly steps back with his hands up, trying to explain his presence. Phoenia refuses to listen and scolds him with pure disgust. She raises her voice, demanding to know why he is still on academy grounds. She firmly declares that a despicable person like him should not be anywhere near the school. Meanwhile, Ed smells smoke and realizes the fish he caught is burning over the campfire. Ed gets completely annoyed because she is taking way too long to finish talking. Phoenia continues her angry rant without realizing how irritated Ed has become. Ed steps forward with a dark, menacing aura surrounding him. Furious about his ruined dinner, Ed glares down at the princess with glowing blue eyes. Phoenia panics and summons her defensive magic, preparing to protect herself. Instead of attacking, Ed suddenly drops down onto one knee. He places a hand over his chest and offers a polite, calm smile. He stays in a formal bow, acting like a completely courteous nobleman. Suspicious of his sudden shift, Phoenia activates her special eye ability to inspect him. She flinches in utter shock as she reads his overwhelming presence. Ed gives a subtle smirk, knowing exactly what she is trying to do. She recalls the terrifying reputation of Ed's notoriously powerful noble household. His corrupt family is infamous for committing unspeakable horrors and massacres. Their villainous ambitions are destined to end in a brutal execution. Meanwhile, a game alert confirms Ed's fish has burned to an inedible crisp. Ed gives a calm, knowing smile as he looks straight ahead. He knows that making a wrong move will lead straight to a game over. Phoenia stumbles backward, shaken by what she saw in his past. She quickly raises her hand and tells Ed to stand up. Ed brings up Professor Glast's upcoming class placement test. The exam requires students to hunt for hidden magical glass marbles in the forest. Ed closes his eyes and starts sharing crucial insider information with her. Phoenia gets defensive and suspects he is trying to bribe her with tips. Her maid gasps in fear at Ed's forward attitude toward the princess. Ed steps close and whispers the exact location of a high-value marble. He tells her to cross the shallow river to a hidden spot. There, a large blooming tree stands in the center of a grassy island. Phoenia walks through the bright forest clearing toward the secret location Ed mentioned. Inside the hollow trunk of a tree, a radiant golden marble shines brightly. Phoenia stares closely at the glowing sphere with a serious and determined gaze. She carefully picks up the valuable golden marble in the palm of her hand. Phoenia recalls how obnoxious and frantic Ed used to act in the past. She contrasts that past image with the calm, polite, and capable young man before her today. Standing beneath the large tree, Phoenia contemplates Ed's unexpected and dramatic personal growth. Meanwhile, the scene shifts back to the Grand Academy building for the final test results. Professor Glast stands before his students and commands them to present their collected marbles. Glast glares coldly at the class, unimpressed and expecting high standards. Several hopeful students proudly present bizarre fake items hoping to pass the exam. Glast angrily scolds the crestfallen students for failing to understand the true test. Glast reveals that only 3 students managed to retrieve the genuine golden marbles. Zach listens intently as the professor prepares to announce the top scores. Laura smiles with quiet confidence from the audience after passing the test. Glast loudly commands the student with the highest marks to rise. Phoenia looks determined as she prepares to accept her top ranking. Phoenia stands up proudly after being declared the #1 student. Meanwhile, Ed ignores the academy rankings and peacefully baits a fishing hook outside. Phoenia kneels on the hall floor as she focuses her inner royal power. The golden scales of justice appear clearly in Phoenia's glowing eyes. A gentle drop disturbs the calm water, sending glowing ripples outward. A stunning, holy figure surrounded by blinding divine light manifests in the vision. The graceful entity floats weightlessly in the air, glowing with celestial energy. Phoenia holds a glowing orb of light, carefully examining her newly awakened royal power. The vision of the celestial entity begins to shatter into pieces. The glowing illusion completely fractures and fades away into darkness. Meanwhile, Ed sits peacefully in the woods, lost in his own thoughts. Back at the academy, Laura stands frustrated while Lucy sleeps right in front of her. Laura clenches her fists, furious about how the class rankings turned out. She storms away into the hallway, determined to prove herself. Phoenia narrows her eyes as she pieces the recent events together. She suddenly realizes that Ed had been telling the truth the entire time. Phoenia tightly grips the sphere of light, determined to uncover more answers. Holding the light beside a massive tree, Phoenia prepares to embrace her new power. A bright light shines through the dark entrance of the clearing. Golden sunlight filters gently through the branches of a large tree. Phoenia stands under the tree, stunned after realizing that Ed spoke the truth. Walking down the academy hall, Phoenia fumes in silence while students cheer nearby. She balls her fists tightly as her frustration continues to boil over. Ed recalls how he intentionally baited the princess to get her attention. He had boldly promised that she could expel him if his words were false. Phoenia stops alone in the middle of the quiet corridor, shaking with anger. Unable to contain her rage, Phoenia punches the hallway wall with force. Her eyes blaze with fury after realizing she fell right into Ed's trap. Out by the sunny forest stream, water suddenly splashes high into the air. Ed happily pulls a fresh fish out of the water with his wooden spear. The morning sun rises as the new semester officially begins at the academy. Someone breathes heavily while running frantically across the campus grounds. Leo sprints as fast as he can toward the grand hall. He gasps for air, desperate to make it on time. Leo pauses for a moment to catch his breath before heading inside. Students in red uniforms gather around the campus courtyard for the new term. Leo walks through the crowd toward the opening ceremony. Inside the grand banquet hall, faculty members begin making their announcements. Nearby students whisper angrily among themselves about a disgraceful classmate. Unbothered by the insults, Ed carefully cuts into a fresh piece of meat. Ed happily devours towering stacks of food, ignoring all the dirty looks around him. A group of gossiping girls walks past Ed while he quietly enjoys his meal. They chatter excitedly, asking Anise what she did over the school break. Anise listens quietly, keeping her thoughts entirely to herself. She glances back toward Ed with a thoughtful expression. She realizes that Ed seems like a completely changed person now. The bright morning sun shines over the vast Magic Academy campus. The bustling school prepares for the busy new semester ahead. Inside a massive lecture hall, hundreds of students gather for their opening class. Meanwhile, a solemn sign marks the entrance to the dean's private office. Ed stands outside the intimidating door, feeling exhausted and nervous. He recalls the strict dean unexpectedly chuckling with amusement. Ed realizes Phoenia must have spoken positively about him to the dean. Ed breathes a heavy sigh of relief after successfully handling the meeting. He warns himself to remain extremely cautious in every move he makes. He knows he must avoid altering the game's original storyline too much. Opening a status window, he reviews his beginner-level archery combat skills. Out in the forest, a wild rabbit stands alert in the grass. An arrow flies swiftly through the air, hitting the target cleanly. Ed picks up his catch and pulls out a hunting knife to prepare food. Suddenly, he pauses as he notices someone relaxing nearby in the woods. Beneath a large blooming tree, a pretty student sits quietly reading a book. Ed peers around the tree, immediately recognizing the girl in front of him. She smiles warmly while enjoying her peaceful study session in the sunlight. This girl is Yennekar, the Academy's top second-year student and a genius elementalist. Yennekar suddenly looks up and notices someone watching her from nearby. Ed freezes in surprise with his hunting bow and basket in hand. In the blink of an eye, Yennekar rushes over and cheerfully greets him. She smiles warmly and explains that the forest spirit already told her about him. Ed is surprised to hear that the master of the forest has been watching him. Yennekar laughs while Ed nervously holds up the rabbit he just hunted. Ed secretly worries that his hunting and woodcutting have upset the forest spirits. Yennekar steps in close to chat happily, making Ed suddenly nervous. Ed turns his head away, blushing from how close she is standing. Yennekar blushes slightly as she notices how flustered Ed has become. She quickly laughs it off with a bright, cheerful smile. Yennekar smiles warmly at Ed, eager to help him however she can. She holds out her glowing hands to demonstrate a spirit contract. Ed looks at her outstretched hands, surprised by her sudden magical offer. Ed pauses in deep thought, carefully considering his next move. He lets out a weary sigh and decides to turn down her help. Yennekar watches him curiously, surprised that he is rejecting her support. Ed politely excuses himself and turns around to walk away. As he walks, Ed reflects on what he knows about her true fate. He knows she is meant to play a massive role in the main story. In the game, Yennekar eventually falls to dark magic and becomes a powerful villain. Her overwhelming power creates chaos that threatens the entire Magic Academy. Yennekar stands by the river and watches quietly as Ed walks down the trail. Yennekar quietly watches Ed leave with a curious look in her eyes. Ed admits to himself that the giant spirit wolf was actually quite friendly. Yennekar gently strokes the chin of her massive spirit wolf. She stands happily surrounded by her powerful elemental spirit companions. The spirit glows with bright magical energy beside her feet. She playfully dives right into the giant wolf's soft, fluffy white fur. Yennekar happily snuggles close to her spirit companion in the sunlight. Meanwhile, deep inside the forest lies a serene lake with a glowing central tree. A long path leads all the way from the distant Academy Castle into the wild forest. A tired student jogs through the woods, unaware of a shadowy figure watching from behind a tree. Yennekar quietly watches Ed frantically take notes during their academy lecture. Later on, she secretly spies on Ed while he washes his clothes in the stream. Ed notices some of his food missing while Yennekar peeks out from behind the firewood. Ed breaks into a sweat, completely aware that he is being watched. He turns around and demands to know why she keeps stalking him everywhere. Yennekar flinches in surprise when Ed suddenly catches her hiding in the bushes. Ed glares fiercely, trying to scare her away with an intimidating look. He reminds her of his terrible reputation as a disgraced, good-for-nothing noble. He stares intently, wondering why she refuses to stay away from him. Instead of running away in fear, Yennekar simply gives him a bright, gentle smile. She stands cheerfully in front of him, entirely unaffected by his scary attitude. Ed looks back at her in pure confusion, totally stunned by her reaction. Ed knows Yennekar looks like a sweet, gentle girl surrounded by pretty flowers. Her harmless appearance hides who she truly is underneath. In reality, she possesses terrifying power and becomes a dangerous final boss in the story. Her destructive aura is capable of bringing ruin to the entire academy. She can summon massive, unstoppable elemental monsters bound in dark magic. Getting involved with her tragic fate would guarantee Ed's doom. Ed decides to lean into his scummy villain reputation to scare her away. Yennekar just beams cheerfully at him, totally ignoring his cold attitude. Ed puts on a dark, threatening look to intimidate her. He bluntly warns her that he is a desperate outcast who might harm her. Yennekar fondly remembers sitting outside and reading her books in the quiet woods. An awkward silence falls over the clearing as Yennekar suddenly feels self-conscious standing before him. Ed feels a bead of sweat drip down his face, wondering if he took his act too far. Later, Ed returns to camp with his bow and a freshly caught rabbit for dinner. He reminds himself to stay vigilant and make sure the main story progresses without any interruptions. He reaches down to open up his wooden shelter and step inside. The basket slips from his hands and drops to the ground in utter shock. Ed gasps in disbelief at the completely unexpected intruder inside his home. Lucy is fast asleep right on top of his bedding, completely unaware of his arrival. She snoozes peacefully, having turned his makeshift camp into her personal nap spot. Lucy wakes up, raises her arms over her head, and lets out a wide yawn. Ed crouches awkwardly inside the small shelter, nervously worrying about interfering with the main storyline. He stares down at her with a tired sigh, wondering what she will do next. Still half asleep, Lucy points her finger straight toward the entrance of the camp. Ed recoils in shock as brilliant blue magical energy erupts violently right in front of him. Within the blazing blue light, the sharp silhouette of a powerful creature begins to take shape. Intense spiritual energy gathers rapidly, revealing an ornate mystical crest on the creature's forehead. Ed watches in stunned silence, overwhelmed by the sheer intensity of the magical pressure. A majestic, high-ranking spirit wolf made of pure blue flame completely materializes before him. Looking at the powerful spirit, Ed realizes he must grow stronger to save Yennekar in the future. The radiant wolf gazes down serenely, surrounded by an overwhelming aura of pure elemental power. Ed listens carefully as the giant spirit wolf appears to be trying to communicate with him. He stares in disbelief, realizing he cannot understand what the spirit is trying to say. Lucy quickly dismisses the spirit and casually points for Ed to step outside the shelter. Ed finds himself kicked out into the forest right beside his own handmade wooden camp. Irritated by her sudden bossiness, Ed refuses to let her take over his home. Inside, Lucy gets comfortable and prepares to take another lazy afternoon nap. Ed angrily storms back into the shelter to confront the sleepy young mage. Ed glares down at her, deeply aware of the massive gap between their magical abilities. He remembers how effortlessly she can leap through the sky using high-level magic circles. Outside, the calm forest remains quiet beside a gently flowing rocky stream. Lucy lazily yawns and stretches on the floor, while Ed looms over her blankly. Ed broods in silent frustration, feeling helpless against such an overwhelming magical genius. The bright sun shines down peacefully over the clearing in the forest. Ed sighs in utter disbelief at how effortlessly powerful Lucy is. He remembers the massive magical circles she summoned high in the sky. She had casually cast high-level flying spells while barely staying awake. Later, Ed finishes crafting a simple wooden snare trap with dried meat bait. When Lucy reaches toward the bait, Ed quickly warns her to stop. Ed recalls all the detailed game guides he read in his past life. His gaming knowledge gives him useful insights into every character's hidden habits. Lucy ignores his warning and happily munches on the stolen dried meat. Ed casually mentions that the dorm maids are searching everywhere for her. Lucy instantly freezes in sheer terror upon hearing about the maids. She drops her snack on the grass, paralyzed by total panic. Lucy quickly pulls down her oversized hat as she gets ready to make a run for it. With an explosive burst of magic, Lucy blasts straight into the sky at incredible speed. Ed sits on the grass as the powerful shockwave from her sudden departure rushes past him. Ed looks up in awe at just how ridiculously fast she managed to flee. He chuckles to himself, amused that his simple warning scared the prodigy mage so easily. Grabbing his axe and rope, Ed heads back into the forest to finish his camp chores. Meanwhile, the Academy initiates its next big mandatory event, joint combat training. Students fill the stadium seats as they cheer on the duelists fighting inside the arena. A student charges forward with great force, delivering a swift downward strike. His opponent calmly stands his ground and raises a hand covered in glowing magic circles. The bright green defensive runes flare up to intercept the incoming attack. A student watches closely as the prestigious academy prepares for the upcoming combat tournament. Powerful figures like Phoenia, Laura, and Zack stand out among the academy's top students. Brilliant magicians like the gentle Yennekar and lazy genius Lucy are also renowned across campus. The gloomy swordsman Klebius crouches low, ready to unleash his sharp blade. Leo stands firm in his red uniform, fully focused on testing his own strength. He lowers his gleaming sword, surrounded by a bright aura of raw determination. Spectators in the crowd beam with excitement at the impressive display of elite fighters. Down in the arena, Zack unleashes a massive spiral of green elemental magic. Zack belares ahead with glowing energy swirling around his outstretched hand. High up in the stands, someone suddenly peeks out with a cheerful greeting. Yennekar excitedly pops up and waves with a huge smile on her face. Yennekar excitedly brings over the official combat tournament bracket to show Ed. She cheerfully opens the paper while Ed watches her with slight hesitation. Ed is immediately struck with pure shock upon reading the paper. Yennekar happily points out the matchup, completely oblivious to Ed's intense panic. Ed realizes he has been paired to fight directly against Princess Phoenia. He stares wide-eyed in horror, knowing this duel could ruin his survival plans. Ed suddenly springs to his feet, fiercely determined to find a way out. Down in the arena, Leo proudly steps forward and raises his hand. Leo makes a passionate vow to give the competition his absolute best. Ed watches from the stands, softly smiling at the young hero's dedication. Ed recalls the brutal struggles the original game's hero had to endure. The memory of blood-stained battlefields flashes across his mind. He remembers the sheer exhaustion and burden the hero carried in every fight. Meanwhile, Zack passionately cheers for Leo with teary eyes. Suddenly, a loud announcement calls out the name of the next competitor. Zack turns pale in shock when he hears who is chosen. Underneath a spare platform nearby, Lucy is peacefully fast asleep. Zack quickly pinches Lucy's cheek to force her awake. He frantically ties Lucy's messy hair back while she stays half asleep. Zack grits his teeth in pure panic, rushing to get her ready. Lucy yawns lazily and stretches, completely unbothered by the chaos. She slowly walks forward onto the stage to face her opponent. Leo readies his stance, preparing to face the strongest student in the academy. He watches intently as his opponent steps into the duel ring. Drawing upon his inner strength, Leo firmly grasps his glowing blade. A radiant golden energy erupts all around his body. Leo unleashes his full power and lunges forward with a loud roar. Lucy is caught completely off guard by his sudden and ferocious attack. Moving like a flash of light, Leo strikes past his opponent. A violent, magical explosion erupts across the entire battle platform. The entire arena shakes violently as the massive energy blast clears. Covered in wounds and blazing with energy, Leo remains standing tall. Against all odds, Leo manages to claim a shocking victory over Lucy. Zack cries joyful tears, relieved that the chaotic match is finally over. Another challenger steps up onto the arena stage to face Lucy in a duel. The dark-haired student equips his brass knuckles and charges forward with a loud roar. He rushes in with incredible speed, determined to land a powerful strike. Lucy instantly summons a magic circle and unleashes a massive blast of blue energy. The overwhelming magic blast sends the boy flying backward through the air. He slams violently into the stone wall of the arena, creating clouds of dust. The challenger slumps unconscious in the rubble, completely battered and defeated. Yennekar and the surrounding students stare at the scene in absolute shock. Zack gulps nervously, trembling in fear at Lucy's monstrous power. Lucy lets out a big, sleepy yawn beneath her oversized witch hat. She stretches her arms out lazily, looking totally bored by the effortless fight. The defeated fighter hangs his head, quietly acknowledging her supreme strength as the top student. Battered and bleeding from the blast, Clevius slowly struggles to rise back up. The spectators wonder how any bare-handed fighter could possibly stand a chance against Lucy. Clevius twitches his bruised fingers, ignoring his brass knuckles lying on the floor. His trembling hand fumbles across the dark floor to search for another weapon. He tightly grabs the hilt of a wooden training sword instead. Shaking in pain, Clevius forces his wounded body upright while holding the blade. Watching from the crowd, Ed smiles knowingly as Clevius reaches for a sword. A blazing red aura suddenly erupts around Clevius as his true power awakens. Engulfed in fiery combat energy, Clevius stands tall and ready to fight. Ed grins with confidence, cheering on Clevius to unleash his full strength. Clevius blasts into the air with explosive speed, surrounded by blazing energy. He dives down from high above, aiming a fierce strike directly at Lucy. Lucy opens her eyes wide in shock as Clevius dives straight toward her with intense speed. Watching from above, Ed smirks, knowing Clevius finally tapped into his true hidden strength. Lucy quickly focuses her magic to counter the sudden and ferocious aerial strike. She instantly raises a dense barrier of swirling wind magic right in front of her face. A massive surge of green wind energy shoots straight into the sky upon impact. Clevius brings his wooden sword crashing down hard against Lucy's impenetrable magic shield. He lets out a furious battle cry as he pours all his strength into the blow. Clevius grinds his teeth and pushes forward with everything he has left. The sheer pressure of the magical collision explodes with a deafening roar. A gigantic, glowing beast of pure magical aura manifests in the middle of the blast. The violent wave of magical power completely engulfs Clevius in midair. The explosive force blows Clevius away, sending him spinning backward through the sky without his sword. A violent blast of wind magic spirals furiously upward through the open arena. Clevius slams hard into the upper balcony wall, creating a massive shockwave of dust and debris.
Leo watches in absolute shock as the violent impact shakes the entire seating area. Clevius hangs embedded high up in the cracked stone pillar above the startled spectators. He falls down to the balcony floor with a heavy thud as Leo stares in disbelief. Lucy looks down coolly from under her large witch hat, completely unfazed by the exchange. Fading magical wind currents swirl gently around her dark cloak as she stands still. The entire auditorium erupts into loud cheers as the audience marvels at the sudden victory.
The lingering smoke slowly clears to reveal Clevius slumped against the shattered balcony wall. Bruised and exhausted, Clevius sits completely immobilized from Lucy's single counterattack. Leo stares wide-eyed, completely overwhelmed by the terrifying power gap between them. He stands frozen in the crowd, utterly speechless after witnessing Lucy's effortless dominance. The entire arena erupts in deafening cheers as the duel intensifies. High up in the stands, Clevius struggles to stay conscious after the violent crash. Battered and bleeding, Clevius pushes himself up against the shattered wall. Down on the stage, Ed watches him with growing concern. Ed straightens up, realizing the situation is turning dangerous.
Clevius begins staggering forward along the balcony as Ed keeps his eyes on him. Gripping his training sword tightly, Clevius takes unsteady steps forward. Clevius glares down with a dark, unstable look in his eyes. Ed quickly moves his feet, knowing he needs to step in immediately. Ed activates his wind spirit magic to grant him a burst of defensive power. A ferocious wind spirit roars to life, surrounding him with green energy. Ed speeds past Lucy in a sudden rush of wind to handle the crisis.
Anise gives a cheerful wink and points ahead. Ed charges past her toward the large double doors. Anise looks around in surprise as he zooms right past her. Ed bursts straight through the doorway into the bright hallway. An unstable student is already on the verge of losing total control. Lucy watches in shock as the sudden chaos unfolds. Ed grits his teeth and pushes himself to move even faster. The dangerous boy marches aggressively past the startled crowd. He continues stepping forward with dark intent. Suddenly, the boy stops dead in his tracks. Ed arrives just in time and thrusts out his arm to block his path. The injured student lies stunned on the floor after being suddenly stopped by Ed. Leo screams out in pure frustration as the chaotic situation escalates rapidly. Sweating under pressure, Leo glares ahead with an intense and furious expression. He stands tense in the hallway, completely consumed by sheer anger and stress. A memory surfaces of the king praising Phoenia for her divine blessing at birth. The king in his royal uniform had reminded her of her unique special power. Her unique ability, insightful eyes, allows her to instantly expose every lie and scheme. Phoenia steadies herself on the ground, ready to uncover the real truth.
She braces herself against the cold floor as her power begins to awaken. Phenia's eyes glow bright yellow as she activates her gift to see past deception. She remembers the many deceitful and scheming figures she has successfully exposed before. Ed stands quietly, rubbing his arm as the entire hall watches him in silence. Phoenia watches Ed closely, trying to make sense of his sudden, unexpected behavior. The surrounding students whisper among themselves, assuming Ed is merely pretending to be a good person. Phoenia closes her eyes tightly, weighing the rumors against what she has personally seen. She remembers Ed's notorious reputation as a cruel noble who caused trouble for everyone.
Her memories recall the disgraceful way Ed used his noble status to demean other students. She recalls the moment Ed lost everything, shouting in furious humiliation during his downfall. Yet she also remembers meeting Ed in the forest, seeing a completely calm and polite boy. In the woods, Ed had bowed respectfully to her without showing any sign of arrogance. Phoenia reflects on Ed's recent actions and the strange peace surrounding him at the academy. Determined to uncover the real truth, Phoenia focuses her glowing insight directly onto Ed. She recalls the raw desperation in his eyes and wonders who he truly is deep down.
Phoenia pushes aside her troubling memories and prepares to focus entirely on the upcoming duel. Both fighters take their positions across the wide arena floor in front of the crowd. Phoenia locks her gaze onto Ed, determined to test his true abilities during combat. She summons her magic circles and conjures swirling streams of water around her body. Phoenia dashes forward rapidly, gliding across the arena floor with enhanced speed. She condenses a glowing sphere of water magic directly into the palm of her hand. Phoenia charges straight toward Ed, who stands quietly and waits for her attack. A fierce surge of magical force shoots forward with incredible speed toward Ed.
She prepares to exchange blows repeatedly until all her lingering doubts disappear. Her sharp eyes stay locked onto him, carefully watching for any sign of his motives. Phoenia strikes Ed head-on with a powerful burst of rushing water magic. The heavy impact sends Ed skidding backward across the arena platform. Phoenia holds out her hand in disbelief as the impact of her attack settles. Ed gets violently blasted backward across the arena by the heavy magical strike. His feet slide quickly across the stone platform from the sheer force of the blow. Ed crashes face down onto the hard floor, lying completely still for a moment. Phoenia gasps in total shock, stunned that he went down from a single attack. The surrounding students in the stands begin to boo and mock Ed for his quick defeat. Ed slowly pushes himself up from the arena floor while the audience continues cheering for Phoenia. Ed stands up while clutching his chest, leaving Phoenia completely confused by his strange behavior. A sudden thought crosses Phenia's mind as she stares closely at the battered boy. Ed keeps his head lowered calmly, refusing to show any anger or panic. Looking at his drenched clothes, Phoenia realizes that Ed has purposefully avoided making eye contact. As the crowd roars across the duel hall, Phoenia begins to understand Ed's real intention. Zack dashes hurriedly through the academy corridors, heading toward his destination in a rush. Meanwhile, Ed reflects that the story's destined hero, Leo, is who matters most. Ed knows Leo must grow strong enough to conquer all the world's upcoming crises. Back in the hallway, Zack suddenly turns around in surprise as someone storms toward him. A sharp, furious glare locks onto him from just outside the doorway. Princess Phoenia bursts through the entrance, panting heavily from running all the way there. Flushed and sweaty, Phoenia looks intensely at Zack with pure irritation in her eyes.
Zack raises his hands in panic, completely confused by her sudden arrival and anger. Phoenia screams at the top of her lungs, ready to unleash all her pent-up frustration. She vents about eccentric classmates, difficult professors like Glast, and overly strict academy staff. Overwhelmed by sheer rage, Phoenia clutches her head and furiously rants while Zack cowers. Zack reaches out and gently pats her shoulder, trying to help calm her down. Zack places his hands on Phenia's shoulders, trying to gently calm her down. Phoenia takes a heavy breath to steady herself inside the grand hall. She continues taking deep breaths near the tall windows to compose herself.
Phoenia covers her face with both hands, suddenly overwhelmed by embarrassment. Phoenia blushes furiously, completely mortified that she lost her temper in front of Zack. Zack awkwardly backs away, wishing he could just escape the uncomfortable situation. Phoenia lets out a weary sigh while Zack cries in sheer relief. Suddenly, a sharp realization flashes across Phenia's golden eyes. She begins suspecting that Ed purposely got disowned to escape his family's dark secrets. Phoenia points dramatically, convincing herself that Ed is secretly working toward a noble goal. Meanwhile, Ed looks nervous as another wild misunderstanding forms around his past actions.
Phoenia glares in total disbelief as Ed casually crosses his arms and tries to explain himself. She furiously asks why he previously went out of his way to cheer up Leo. Phoenia demands to know why he would ever encourage the very person he tried to get expelled. Ed attempts to make another excuse, but his nose stretches out like Pinocchio. Phenia's special truth-detecting ability activates automatically during the conversation. Ed keeps making up excuses while his cartoonish nose grows longer and longer. Her ability instantly flags his words as a blatant lie. Phoenia stomps her feet in utter fury as constant lie notifications pop up everywhere. She literally breathes fire in exasperation over how terrible of a liar Ed is. Phoenia throws her hands up in absolute outrage at his continuous nonsense. Steam hisses from her head as her frustration finally boils over. Ed watches her with a tense expression, realizing he cannot talk his way out of this. Phoenia points toward the door and points out how eager Ed is to leave. Ed opens the door and prepares to step out into the hallway. Before walking away, Ed suddenly stops and rests his hand on the doorway. Phoenia recalls all the strange and exhausting people she has to deal with every day. Overwhelmed by constant stress and deception, Phoenia clutches her head in absolute rage. Ed glances back nervously at the furious princess looming behind him. Phoenia calms down and looks at Ed with sudden curiosity. Ed turns his head and begins offering her some gentle advice. He tells her to enjoy her school life instead of stressing over royal duties. Phenia's truth-detecting eye confirms that his kind words are completely genuine. Surprised by his heartfelt sincerity, Phoenia stands frozen with a deep blush. As the sun begins setting over the academy, tired panting echoes across the grounds. Ed hurries down the academy hallway at full speed. He spots Leo resting nearby and rushes directly toward him. Leo sits quietly, clutching his wooden practice sword. Ed hesitates in surprise as he approaches. Suddenly, a girl leaps out to shield Leo from him. Ed is caught completely off guard by her sudden move. She fiercely demands that Ed stop harassing Leo. Tears well in her eyes as she angrily scolds him. She reminds him that Leo has suffered enough already. Her intense glare makes it clear she will defend Leo no matter what. Ed tries to explain his intentions, but she refuses to stand down. Ed stands completely frozen as heavy footsteps suddenly approach him in the grand hall. Ed stares in shock when he sees the person stepping right in front of him. Leo raises his arm and places himself between Ed and Ayla to protect her. Leo walks forward with steady determination, ready to confront Ed face to face. Leo remembers how Ayla always ran to his side whenever he faced difficult times. She had always patted his back gently, giving him the courage to never give up. Her unwavering support and cheerful encouragement had carried Leo through his darkest moments. Back in the present, Leo stands tall with Ayla and glares fiercely at Ed. Ed swallows nervously as the heavy tension builds up between them. Leo admits that Ed fought surprisingly well during the entrance exam. Looking deeply suspicious, Leo demands to know what Ed is secretly plotting. Ed turns his back slightly, carefully preparing his response to the hostile confrontation. Leo aggressively confronts Ed, demanding to know what he is plotting behind everyone's backs. Ed remains entirely unfazed by the sudden accusation and anger. Giving a calm, confident smile, Ed brushes off Leo's intense hostility. Ed turns his back on them and begins walking across the spacious hall. Leo and Ayla watch Ed leave, stunned by his nonchalant attitude. Both Leo and Ayla look completely disgusted by Ed trying to act cool. Ed approaches the massive exit doors at the end of the room. Suddenly, a loud blast causes Ed to stop and quickly look over his shoulder. A massive column of roaring flames violently erupts through the building. Ed shields his eyes as the blazing firestorm lights up the entire hall. A giant fire dragon spirit charges forward, roaring fiercely amidst the inferno. A scorching blast of dragonfire erupts across the entire hallway. Phoenia quickly activates a glowing blue magic circle to defend herself. She leaps into action, conjuring a massive wave of ice magic. Sharp glaciers instantly rise from the floor to counter the incoming flames. Thick sheets of solid ice spread rapidly across the battlefield. The massive ice wall temporarily traps the fiery dragon inside. Phoenia stands ready as the beast struggles behind the frozen barrier. Fissures suddenly spiderweb across the ice as intense heat builds behind it. Yennekar charges forward atop the roaring fire dragon, obliterating the frozen shield. The dragon unleashes an even hotter blaze that melts through the defenses. Chunks of shattered ice burst into the air from the overwhelming blast. The frosty magic completely disintegrates under the beast's immense power. Yennekar stares down coldly, surrounded by the radiant glow of her spirit magic. Leo and Ayla look up in total shock at the overwhelming display of power. Leo stares in pure horror, realizing the true extent of the danger before them. Phoenia desperately deploys multiple magic circles to block the incoming dragon breath. The massive fire dragon roars as it unleashes a devastating wave of flames. The enormous blaze crashes directly into Phoenia, completely engulfing her defense. Yennekar looks on with an eerie smile as the inferno consumes her opponent. A flashback shows Yennekar surrounded by classmates who constantly admired her. She used to laugh happily, enjoying the warmth and affection from everyone around her. Her eyes turn dark as painful memories suddenly begin to flood back into her mind. She recalls the terrible day an injured student was rushed away on a stretcher. Despite the tragedy, everyone continued to pile heavy praise and expectations onto her. Yennekar stares in shock as the overwhelming pressure of her past weighs heavily upon her. She remembers the cheerful crowd in the hall celebrating her while ignoring the hidden pain. Ed brushes off his academy uniform, completely uninterested in getting involved with the main cast. He turns his back on the bustling hall and quietly walks outside into the evening. Ed gazes at the night sky, determined to stay focused on his own survival. Later that night, the serene forest is quiet under a canopy of bright stars. Ed checks his submerged fishing net in the stream to gather food for dinner. After washing up in the cold water, he reviews his steadily improving stat screen. His rigorous daily survival training has built him a remarkably fit and muscular body. He steps out onto the muddy riverbank, dripping wet from his evening bath. Suddenly, Yennekar peeks through her fingers with wide, flushed eyes in total shock. Ed turns around in surprise as a deeply blushing Yennekar hides behind a nearby bush. Yennekar sits quietly by the warm campfire at Ed's forest camp. She looks down with a troubled expression, lost in her own deep worries. Ed finishes buttoning up his white shirt as he watches her carefully.
He wonders why the Academy's top honor student chose to seek out someone like him. The two students sit across from each other in the quiet forest clearing. Yennekar flashes back to a painful memory of an injured girl lying hurt on a cot. She remembers the heavy guilt of accidentally injuring another student during magic training. The incident involved breaking the rules during an intense duel with her opponent. Returning to the present, Yennekar hugs her knees while dwelling on her regret. She asks Ed if she should go and apologize to the girl she hurt. Ed listens quietly and fixes his calm gaze on the troubled girl.
Yennekar looks up in surprise as Ed prepares to give his response. She remembers how easily she used to smile and chat with her fellow students. Yennekar hugs her knees and wonders if she should finally try to make things right. Ed listens quietly and gives her his honest, calm advice. Feeling a sudden wave of relief, Yennekar happily stretches her arms out. She waves her hands cheerfully across the campfire while Ed works on crafting a net. Looking at him closely, Yennekar realizes just how much Ed has changed over the past year. He has grown far more capable and physically hardened through all his tough training. Ed keeps steadily weaving his net without paying any attention to his own improvements. Yennekar rests her head on her arms and smiles warmly as she watches him. She sits peacefully in the cozy glow of the campfire. Fireflies drift quietly through the night forest as crickets chirp in the darkness. The next morning, the bright sun shines over the grand towers of the Magic Academy. Ed walks down the quiet academy hallway lost in deep thought. He breaks into a cold sweat as he worries about the dangers ahead. Ed recalls the dozens of terrible bad endings from the original game.
He knows that one wrong move could easily trigger a disaster. Right from the start, the storyline was full of deadly pitfalls. In one possible route, Leo could be ambushed and assassinated by a killer. If the main hero died, the whole world was doomed to fall. In another bad ending, Ayla could suffer a fatal fall from a cliff. There was even a route where Leo was burned alive by raging magic. Ed knows he must prevent all these tragedies from becoming real. He clenches his jaw, resolved to keep everyone alive from the shadows. Suddenly, a hooded girl steps right in front of him, startling him with a chill. A cheerful red-haired girl in a black uniform suddenly appears in front of Ed. Her arms and leg are wrapped tightly with white bandages as she stands before him. She gives him a knowing smile and greets him casually by his full name. Her bright expression hides a sharp, calculating mind beneath her friendly academy appearance. This girl is Lortel, a crucial merchant student with major influence in the academy. Ed recalls how Lortel often stands in stark contrast to Princess Phoenia in the game. He remembers her dark, ruthless side whenever she pursues her ambitious goals. In the original story, players faced painful choices involving her tragic, realistic struggles. Ed nods to himself as he ponders the difficult political dilemma she represents. Without saying a word, Ed simply turns around and walks away, leaving her stunned. Lortel quickly catches up, playfully trying to charm him with cute expressions. She walks backward in front of him, trying to start an easy conversation. Lortel puts on an innocent smile, trying to act cute and friendly toward Ed. Ed crosses his arms and stares at her coldly, completely unimpressed by her fake act. Seeing he's not swayed, Lortel smoothly pulls out several shiny gold coins between her fingers. A large, gleaming gold coin is revealed, showing she is offering a substantial amount of wealth. Lortel leans in dangerously close to Ed with a sly, confident smirk on her face. She reaches inside his red jacket and quietly slips the gold coins into his chest pocket. The shiny gold coins settle securely into his inner coat pocket with a soft clink. Lortel watches Ed carefully, confident that she has successfully caught his interest with money. Instead of turning her away, a knowing smirk slowly forms on Ed's face. Ed reaches out his hand toward Lortel, willing to entertain her lucrative offer. Lortel smiles cunningly, believing her money has successfully bought his cooperation. She extends her bandaged hand to shake on their new mutual arrangement. Ed firmly shakes Lortel's bandaged hand to finalize their new secret agreement. Lortel silently reflects on how desperation makes ordinary people easily manipulated by wealth. She knows that cornered people will betray their own families for gold. Most people in hardship readily throw away their pride just to survive. However, Lortel recognizes that Ed is entirely different from the usual desperate fools. She tosses her shiny gold coins into her hand, pleased with his sharp wit. Lortel turns around with a sly smile, clearly fascinated by Ed's unique personality. As Ed walks away through the front gates, Lortel watches him from the courtyard. Ed grits his teeth tightly, knowing he made a very risky bargain. He looks terrified as he imagines the dangerous horrors that might await him ahead. Later that night, bright shooting stars streak across the dark blue sky. The massive academy buildings stand tall and quiet in the cold night air. Yennekar turns around in surprise as someone calls out to her in the quiet hallway. Lortel approaches with a gentle smile, her arms wrapped in medical bandages. She walks closer under the pale moonlight, greeting Yennekar in a polite tone. Lortel smirks with glowing green eyes, secretly plotting a clever scheme. She brings up a past combat training exercise from their academy class. Lortel reminds her how using advanced magic during the battle caused a huge fuss. Yennekar listens quietly while Lortel schemes to exploit her gentle personality. Lortel maintains an innocent facade to catch Yennekar completely off guard. The two girls stand facing each other along the dimly lit balcony walkway.
Lortel plans to manipulate Yennekar by playing heavily on her feelings of guilt. Suddenly, Lortel freezes in genuine shock and begins to break out in a sweat. Yennekar offers a warm, innocent smile that completely catches Lortel off guard. Yennekar commands powerful elemental spirits, including a towering fire dragon that watches over the academy grounds. With her vast network of spirits reporting to her, nothing in the northern forest escapes her notice. This means Yennekar knows all about the intimate late-night moments Lortel recently spent with Ed. Realizing her secret moves were fully observed, Lortel breaks into a cold, nervous sweat.
Yennekar calmly brings up the time Lortel tried to buy her friendship using gold coins. Lortel had tried to treat their relationship like a mere financial transaction to gain an advantage. Yennekar leans in close with a chilling, shadowy glare, revealing her terrifying hidden dominance. She calmly steps past Lortel, completely shattering the merchant girl's usual sense of control. To Yennekar, Ed offering his honest hand was worth far more than any manipulative scheme. Ed gave her hard-earned money with genuine care, which touched Yennekar's heart much more deeply. Yennekar quickly switches back to her cute, innocent smile, leaving Lortel scrambling to reevaluate her rival.
As Yennekar cheerfully walks down the hallway, Lortel stands alone, realizing she completely underestimated her. Lortel realizes Yennekar understands the world far better than she lets on. Yennekar quietly opens the bedroom door to take her leave. She turns back one last time with an unsettlingly calm smile. Without saying another word, Yennekar steps out into the dark hallway. The heavy doors click shut, leaving the room completely silent. Left alone, Lortel crosses her arms and lets out a frustrated sigh. She breaks into a cold sweat, realizing how dangerous Yennekar truly is. Lortel thinks about Yennekar's reputation as the Academy's golden prodigy. Beneath her cheerful exterior, Yennekar silently carries the suffocating pressure of everyone's expectations. Living under that intense pressure has forged Yennekar into an unstoppable force. The next morning arrives bright and peaceful with a vibrant rainbow overhead. Out in the forest camp, freshly washed clothes hang to dry in the sun. Lucy sniffs the morning air curiously with a suspicious look on her face. Suddenly, a loud blast scatters laundry everywhere as Ed ducks in total panic. The sudden shockwave knocks Ed backward onto the forest floor. Ed sits up in confusion with a white towel draped over his head. Standing right in front of him is Belle, a calm maid holding a basket. Ed pulls the towel off his head as he stares up at his unexpected visitor. He is reminded of the day he was kicked out of the academy dormitory. Ed nervously tries to explain his messy campsite while Belle inspects the area. Belle stops near his wooden shelter and looks at him with mild curiosity. Ed clutches his laundry, looking completely baffled by her sudden questions. Ed stares back in stunned silence, wondering why she sought him out. As the head maid of the prestigious Aphelios Hall, Belle held immense authority and a terrifying reputation.
Known for her strictness, she maintained absolute order and discipline among all the Academy's maid staff. However, today she carried a woven basket into the forest with a surprisingly helpful intention. Ed felt nervous and gulped, wondering why someone so influential had come out to find him. Belle directly asked Ed how he managed to gather enough food to survive on his own. She was caught off guard by his polite and calm response. Ed smiled warmly and complimented her, cleverly steering the conversation in his favor. Ed happily clapped his hands together, gratefully accepting the maid's advice and guidance.
Belle shared valuable knowledge with him about identifying safe fruits, mushrooms, and herbs around the woods. With her guidance, Ed quickly gathered a basket filled with fresh produce from the wild. He combined this new foraging knowledge with his fishing traps and dried meat racks to secure meals. Ed places his ornate golden cup over a stack of firewood to boil some water. He activates his fire magic, instantly lighting the wood and heating the cup. His beginner magic skills have reached level 10 through continuous daily use. Sitting by the fire, Ed patiently waits for the water to heat up. His system confirms he has successfully brewed herbal tea from the foraged plants. The fresh yellow flowers float gently inside the fragrant hot tea. Ed takes a careful sip using leaves to hold the warm cup. He sits quietly at the edge of camp, admiring the breathtaking sunset. Feeling content, Ed smiles as he enjoys a rare moment of peace. Suddenly, a strange, bright flash glints across the evening sky. Ed looks up in confusion, wondering what just appeared. A massive beam of brilliant light shoots straight into the heavens. A sudden massive blast of magical energy explodes right in the middle of Ed's camp. The violent shockwave shatters the wooden logs and blasts debris in every direction. The intense force hurls Ed backward through the air until he crashes hard onto the ground. A huge cloud of thick white smoke immediately covers the entire campsite. Ed coughs heavily as he pulls himself up from the wreckage in pure shock. Thick smoke continues to drift over what used to be his cozy wooden shelter. The shelter is now completely flattened into broken planks and shattered logs. As the heavy smoke slowly clears, a glowing figure appears inside a deep crater. Lucy sits weakly in the center of the blast crater, surrounded by fading magic. She breathes heavily while glowing energy swirls softly around her small body. Ed brushes the dust off his clothes and quickly rushes over to check on her. He is completely stunned when Lucy reveals that someone nearly managed to kill her.
Lucy trembles in fear while explaining that Belle became unexpectedly furious with her. Belle had stormed over with glowing eyes after Lucy skipped class like usual. Lucy noticed Belle seemed stressed about someone else and took her anger out on her. She admits she quickly panicked because she thought she was about to get beaten. Lucy sighs in relief, glad she managed to escape before Belle could hit her. She casually looks at the giant crater she created just to escape a scolding. Ed grits his teeth in pure rage after hearing her ridiculous reason. He angrily smacks Lucy over the head with a wooden stick.
Lucy rubs her sore head in confusion, wondering why he attacked her. She continues kneeling on the dirt while slowly looking back up at him. Her eyes widen in absolute horror as she sees his terrifying face. Ed grins menacingly with glowing red eyes, ready to punish her properly. Ed clenches his hand, completely ready to discipline Lucy for the destruction she caused. He declares that the first strike is payback for wrecking his entire camp shelter. Loud smacks and Lucy's crying wails echo throughout the forest as dusk falls. Later on, the evening sun sets quietly over the Grand Academy buildings.
Ed heads to the Academy Library to gather all the construction information he needs. Sitting on the floor surrounded by books, he studies architectural designs to rebuild his camp. Suddenly, Ed senses someone watching him and shifts his gaze sideways. He spots a young pink-haired girl standing nervously in the aisle near him. The cute girl offers Ed a polite and cheerful smile. She's introduced as Elka, a first-year student from the magic department. Ed feels awkward as she stares at him with sparkling, eager eyes. Ed looks back at her cautiously, wondering what she could possibly want from him.
Elka stares in wide-eyed shock as she listens intently to Ed. Ed keeps his gaze sharp and calm as he looks back at her. He remains seated on the carpet beside tall stacks of research books. Warm afternoon sunlight pours through the large arched window behind them. Elka breaks into a cheerful, friendly smile as her mood brightens. She thinks back to the proud figure of a hero marching forward. Elka stands happily chatting with Ed while he relaxes on the floor. She cheerfully waves goodbye to him from behind the wooden bookcase. Suddenly, Ed senses a sudden threat and his eyes narrow in alarm. A violent tremor shakes the entire library without any warning. Both Ed and Elka drop low to steady themselves on the vibrating floor. Elka gasps in fright as the massive bookshelf beside them begins to creak. Heavy books tumble off the shaking shelves as the violent tremor rips through the library. Elka turns away and braces herself as heavy volumes rain down all around her. Meanwhile, a massive magical crest ignites with blinding purple energy across the academy grounds. A colossal beam of light shoots straight up into the sky, shaking the entire campus. Shortly after, swarms of terrifying shadow monsters begin appearing outside the student halls. Students find themselves trapped near the courtyard fountain as the sinister beasts surround them. Ayla stares up in terror, recognizing the dangerous high-tier summoning ritual taking place. Dark magical energy swirls through the sky as the massive summon approaches completion. Princess Phoenia gravely tells the group that only one person has enough power to cast this spell. Phoenia explains that the one responsible for the sudden attack is top second-year student Yennekar. Yennekar has lost control after being overwhelmed by a dark, powerful spirit. The students gather quietly near the courtyard fountain, shocked by the princess's words. Phoenia watches the unfolding chaos with deep concern.
Leo speaks up urgently, refusing to stand by while the academy is under attack. He rests his hand near his blade, ready to fight their way through. Imperial Guard Captain Claire tries to keep everyone calm and assess the danger. The guard captain stands ready to protect the royal princess and the students. Phoenia watches as Leo and Ayla prepare to take on the threat. Anise questions whether they are really strong enough to face a high-ranking spirit. Clevius cowers in complete terror at the thought of fighting. Meanwhile, giant, shadowy monsters loom over the plaza, cutting off any easy escape.
A blast of dark purple energy surges violently across the night sky. The defenders panic as they realize two massive, high-ranking spirits have appeared. A towering horned demon emerges from the shadows with glowing red eyes. Beside it, a fierce dragon spirit roars while engulfed in dark flames. Clevius screams in absolute terror and clutches his head in despair. Phoenia watches nervously, feeling the overwhelming dread in the air. Claire analyzes the battlefield and suspects the high-ranking dark spirit Velisper is at fault. She explains that dark spirits are deadly forces that elementalists can rarely handle. Their monstrous power is far too corruptive for ordinary summoners to command.
Instead of serving, these demonic entities act as puppet masters over their hosts. Yennekar has become completely possessed, moving only as the dark spirit's puppet. Claire remains puzzled about how Velisper managed to take full control of Yennekar. Zack interrupts the conversation, insisting they focus on their immediate response instead. He asks whether the top students should take matters into their own hands. Standing with crossed arms, he waits for a decisive order to act. Princess Phoenia swallows hard under the sudden weight of royal responsibility. The gathered students wait quietly in the courtyard for her command. Looking down in silence, Phoenia feels overwhelming pressure from everyone around her. She hesitates, her mind drifting back to a recent conversation. She remembers Ed telling her that no one carries heavier burdens than she does. In her memory, Ed gently suggested that she try to take things easier. The instructors and students stare intently, waiting for her final strategy. Leo and the others prepare themselves, knowing only the strongest can fight. Phoenia steps forward with a determined look, ready to announce her bold tactical decision. She crosses her arms and confidently declares that she will shoulder all the responsibility. She offers a reassuring smile, standing firm despite the immense pressure on her shoulders. A student drops to the ground in shock after hearing her sudden and daring plan. He sinks onto one knee, overwhelmed with disbelief at what she is asking them to do. Phoenia rubs her forehead with a sigh as the panicking student trembles behind her. Elka quickly dashes forward with the other students to head out toward the library. She hurries past Phoenia to join the frontline effort without any hesitation. Clevius widens his eyes in shock as he notices Elka rushing straight into danger. He grabs Elka by the shoulders, screaming at her to stop this reckless move. He whips around angrily, furious at the orders that put everyone in harm's way. Clevius clenches his fists and angrily confronts Phoenia for sending the defenseless Elka into battle. Clevius stops in his tracks and turns around with a fierce, angry glare. Phoenia spreads her arms to block him, firmly insisting on sticking to the strategy. Clevius grits his teeth, sweating as his anger and panic continue to rise. Phoenia explains the harsh reality while Ayla stands nervously in the background. Clevius grabs Ayla and violently shakes her, demanding to know what is happening. Terrified by his sudden aggression, Ayla begins to tear up in fear. Clevius's eyes glow with pure fury as a dark power awakens inside him. He clenches his fists tightly while a sinister dark energy radiates from his body. Crying loudly, Ayla shouts out the truth about Elka's dangerous situation. The dark pressure pouring from Clevius intimidates everyone, including the nearby teachers. The other students recoil in shock as Clevius is completely consumed by terrifying rage. As onlookers back away in horror, Clevius realizes that Elka is trapped in danger. Phoenia looks on in pure shock as Ziggs is overcome by a terrifying aura. She spreads her arms wide to block Ziggs from rushing into danger alone. Phoenia desperately tries to talk him down, worried about the massive magical threat ahead. In the distance, a gigantic pillar of magic light erupts into the sky. Nearby allies freeze stiff in disbelief at the overwhelming power display. Phoenia realizes too late that nothing she says can stop Ziggs right now. Consumed by intense fury, Ziggs's face darkens into a terrifying expression.
He draws his blade without hesitation, fully prepared to slaughter whatever stands in his way. Ziggs launches himself straight into the sky with explosive force, leaving Phoenia behind. Ayla collapses to the ground in tears as the shockwave blasts across the plaza. A pack of shadowy beast monsters charges forward aggressively on the battlefield. Ziggs instantly slices through the monsters with a single, devastating blade strike. Ziggs continues his mid-air assault, slicing cleanly through another large shadow beast. His powerful magical slash tears the dark creature completely in half. Ziggs roars with fierce fury as he pushes forward without hesitation.
He rushes ahead with intense speed, fueled by his desperate need to save Elka. A flashback begins, showing a sharp green eye stalking prey in the wild grasslands. An unsuspecting horned beast grazes peacefully while an ambush lurks nearby. The wild animal trots quietly along the dirt path, unaware of the danger. A sharp hunting blade cuts silently through the air. The beast suddenly senses the lethal threat looming over it. A young wild hunter leaps down from above with relentless precision. The hunter grabs the massive beast firmly to finish the hunt. A decisive strike fatally pierces the prey in a sudden spray of blood.
As a boy, Ziggs dragged his hunted prey through town without understanding civilization. The local townsfolk watched him with fear and disgust. People spread cruel rumors, calling him a savage barbarian. He walked alone through the streets wearing a wild wolf pelt. Suddenly, a sweet young voice asked him for his name. A little girl named Elka stood before him with a gentle smile. She playfully told him he looked just like a walking wolf. Her bright, pure laughter filled the lonely boy with warmth. Elka noticed the boy's unexpected reaction. Tears streamed down Ziggs' face at her simple kindness.
He realized just how deeply isolated and lonely he had felt. Elka and her father warmly welcomed Ziggs into their family. Warm meals and magical training marked the beginning of Ziggs' new life with Elka. Under Elka's gentle guidance, Ziggs learned magic and happily left his harsh wilderness days behind. Elka cheerfully gave Ziggs a neat haircut, transforming him into a proper young gentleman. As his wild hair fell away, Ziggs fully embraced his new and peaceful life. Back in the present, ferocious blue wolf beasts charge forward into the battle. Ziggs unleashes a blazing energy slash that cuts right through the charging monsters. The powerful strike instantly bisects the massive beasts in midair. Ziggs leaps forward, slicing through the remaining enemies with relentless fury. Filled with fierce determination, Ziggs roars as he pushes his combat skills to the limit. Driven by his devotion, he resolves to crush any threat that stands in his way. Ziggs is determined to defeat Ed at all costs to protect a tearful Elka from harm. Ziggs remembers the dark rumors of Ed mistreating a younger student. Furious, Ziggs dashes through the empty academy hallway at full speed. He pants heavily, narrowing his eyes with fiery determination to save Elka. He suddenly spots the bruised and bloodied Ed sitting against the wall. Ed looks up in surprise, clutching his injured arm. Ziggs angrily grabs Ed by the collar and shouts in his face. Ziggs tosses Ed aside and frantically rushes into the nearby room. He bursts through the doorway, calling out Elka's name in panic. Inside, he discovers Elka sleeping peacefully, completely safe and unharmed. He notices Ed had even covered her with his own jacket to keep her warm. Ziggs stands frozen in shock as he realizes Ed was protecting her all along. Ziggs clenches his fist tightly as intense guilt begins to overwhelm him. He clutches his head in disbelief, trying to process his terrible mistake. Breathing heavily, he feels awful for attacking the person who saved his friend. Ziggs looks up and begins to carefully examine the surrounding room. Massive bookshelves had been moved into place to create a heavy barricade. He looks around in awe, realizing how much effort went into securing the room. The thick curtains were completely drawn to hide her from raging spirits outside. Ziggs reaches out and touches a chalkboard filled with complex magical runes. Protective spells had been carefully inscribed to conceal her presence and mana. The entire room had been meticulously turned into a secure shelter for Elka. Ziggs checks the jacket on Elka and is horrified to find blood on it. He notices a trail of fresh blood leading right out into the hallway. A solemn stone statue rests quietly under the soft light. Ziggs sits bruised against the wall, silently reflecting on Ed's actions. He stares at the bloodstains marking the path where Ed walked away. Ziggs realizes Ed quietly endured immense pain to keep everyone safe. He suddenly recalls how the chaos first started in the academy. Dark memories of the sudden disaster rush back into his mind. A violent tremor shook the library, sending books falling off the tall shelves.
Thick clouds of dust and debris filled the room as the building rattled. Ed carried the unconscious Elka on his shoulder while forcing his way inside. He moved quickly through the shaking room to secure a safe spot for her. Ed glanced outside and saw a giant magic circle glowing above the academy. He immediately pulled the thick window curtains shut to hide them from view. Ed nods firmly to himself, making up his mind about what he needs to do next. He pushes heavy furniture across the room to create a secure barricade for Elka. After keeping Elka safely hidden inside, he prepares to deal with the rampaging spirits outside. Ed pauses for a moment as he thinks about Yennekar and her incredible spirit affinity. He remembers how effortlessly Yennekar commands powerful high-level spirits in harmony. Her overwhelming magical talent allows her to summon legendary elemental beasts with ease. Ed steps through the large double doors, heading straight toward the unfolding chaos. A massive swarm of violent purple spirit monsters roars and rushes through the corridors. A terrifying dark beast screeches aggressively as it lunges directly toward him. Ed immediately channels his mana, gathering a bright sphere of green wind magic in his hand. He grits his teeth and dashes forward fearlessly to attack the oncoming horde. He unleashes a powerful blast of green magic to wipe out the approaching monsters. Ed reviews his newly upgraded fire and spirit magic skills after the battle. Battered and exhausted, Ed notes how close his abilities are to reaching the next level. Suddenly, Ziggs walks down the hallway, carrying Elka safely on his back. Ed looks up in surprise as Ziggs approaches him in the corridor. Ziggs stares down at Ed with an intense, dead-serious expression. Ed sighs in mild disbelief at how overly intense Ziggs is being.
Ziggs begins speaking with deep conviction and sincerity. He explains that he now owes Ed a massive personal debt. Ed quietly listens to the passionate boy without interrupting. Holding Elka securely, Ziggs shows immense gratitude for keeping her safe. Ed watches him silently, caught off guard by the sincere display. Ziggs firmly vows that he will repay Ed no matter what it takes. Ed looks down thoughtfully at the injured girl and considers their next move. Ziggs waits with a serious expression while keeping Elka secure on his back. Ed speaks up to give Ziggs instructions on what to do next.
Ed tells Ziggs to take Elka straight back to the student dorms. Ed insists that getting her to safety is the top priority right now. Ziggs questions why Ed places so much trust in a weak student like Leo. Ed brushes off his uniform and explains that Leo is essential for the battle. Ed knows Leo possesses a special sword technique capable of piercing the giant fire spirit. Without Leo unlocking his signature elemental slash, they cannot defeat the boss. Ziggs nods in understanding and prepares to head back with Elka. Ed breathes a sigh of relief and rests against a stone pillar as Ziggs leaves.
Suddenly, Ed stops cold as another urgent problem crosses his mind. Ziggs confesses that he has never even interacted with Leo before. Ed realizes the original timeline changed, so the two never formed their friendship. A massive beam of destructive magic suddenly erupts high into the sky. Without their bond, Leo never learned the vital sword technique needed to win. Leo still bravely led the student strike team directly into combat. The massive, high-ranking fire dragon glared menacingly at the challengers. The dragon unleashed its terrifying fury, overwhelming the battlefield. The strike squad was instantly overpowered and blasted away by the beast. At the student defense base in the square, an uneasy silence hangs. Ziggs lowers his head with a heavy heart upon seeing the survivors. Leo and the rest of the vanguard stand battered, bloody, and thoroughly defeated. Phoenia reassures Ziggs that having him there wouldn't have prevented their crushing defeat. An injured student warrior reports their disastrous loss to the rest of the academy. Phoenia listens in horror as she realizes the true extent of their defeat. The exhausted fighters collapse to the ground while Clevius cowers in complete terror. Phoenia trembles in despair, wondering how they could possibly stop the monster now.
The surrounding survivors look around in distress, waiting for someone to give orders. Suddenly, Ed appears in front of the gathered students. Phoenia widens her eyes in disbelief when she sees him stepping up. Ed calmly walks forward to take complete control of the dire situation. Covered in soot and blood, Ed announces a new plan to fight back. Ed rolls up his sleeves, fully prepared to lead the counterattack himself. Ed looks firmly at the gathered students and begins laying out his tactical battle plan. He rolls up his blood-stained shirt sleeves, getting ready to lead the dangerous operation himself. Phoenia, Leo, and the rest of the weary fighters listen closely to his every word. Lortel rests on the floor nearby, watching Ed take command with quiet hope. Clevius panics and waves his hand, nervously questioning if Ed's reckless idea could truly work. Ziggs steps forward to silence Clevius and let Ed finish explaining his battle strategy. Ed reminds everyone of the terrifying spirits guarding Yennekar inside the Grand Hall.
He remains calm while breaking down the exact nature of the high-ranking fire spirit. The fearsome blue dragon spirit possesses immense armor that normal attacks cannot easily pierce. Ed details a split plan where a decoy team lures the dragon while others advance. Claire speaks up nervously, worried about the dragon's overwhelming destructive power. She warns that if the distraction fails, the massive beast will quickly slaughter them all. Ed explains that the assault squad will still have to face powerful spirit beasts guarding Yennekar. Claire listens anxiously as Ed details just how dangerous and difficult their upcoming battle will be. Ziggs stands quietly behind Ed, carefully considering every part of the high-stakes plan. A tense silence falls over the weary crowd as nobody wants to volunteer for the suicidal decoy mission. Suddenly, a single gloved hand rises straight into the air. Leo bravely offers to be the bait, but Ed immediately shoots down the idea. Ed tells Leo to lower his hand because he is needed for the main assault unit. Ed gives him a stern look, demanding strict obedience so their operation succeeds. Ed physically pushes Leo's arm down and declares that he will personally lead the diversion. With a cold, focused glare, Ed prepares to assign the rest of his decoy team.
Ed announces that only 3 fighters will be tasked with drawing the dragon spirit away. Clevius screams in absolute terror upon discovering Ed selected him for the deadly decoy squad. Clevius screams in utter disbelief as Ed lays out their reckless decoy plan. Ed remains entirely calm and urges everyone to focus on the mission. Laura takes a deep breath and steadies herself despite her painful injuries. She reminds the main strike group that the entire school depends on them. Leo and Ayla listen closely with quiet determination in their eyes. Laura and Ziggs declare that their team must take down Yennekar directly.
Ed prepares to lead his small squad to draw away the dangerous summons. Laura gives the final signal for both teams to immediately begin the assault. Both squads split apart and sprint toward their separate objectives. Laura charges full speed ahead with the main strike force behind her. Meanwhile, Ed's decoy team enters the hallway and encounters a ferocious spirit beast. Leo clutches his injured arm in shock while Claire stares forward in disbelief. A giant blue dragon spirit lies curled up guarding the grand hallway ahead. Leo, Clevius, and Claire sprint together directly toward the sleeping elemental beast. Clevius looks nervously at Leo as they charge deeper into danger. Leo calmly nods back, showing no fear despite the terrifying odds. Clevius watches him with rising respect, amazed by Leo's steady composure. Leo stayed completely focused on the approaching battle ahead. Suddenly, the massive elemental dragon slams its heavy claw onto the ground. Engulfed in bright blue flames, the awakened monster roars at the intruders. The fearsome beast looms overhead, ready to strike down anyone approaching. Clevius remembers Lortel briefing them on how to distract this powerful guardian. Feeling comforted that he is not fighting alone, Clevius smiles bravely. Clevius rushes forward with newfound confidence to lead the charge against the beast. The massive blue dragon opens its jaws and unleashes a deafening roar. Clevius slides right past the gigantic monster to draw its attention. He dashes quickly down the hall, expecting his friends to follow the plan. He calls out in confusion, wondering if they are successfully luring the dragon away. Clevius turns around and is shocked to see that his teammates completely vanished. He's left totally alone in front of the giant, menacing dragon spirit. The massive dragon looms directly over him, freezing Clevius in pure dread. The beast roars furiously right in his face, ready to strike. Clevius sprints away at full speed, screaming in terror as the monster chases him. Meanwhile, outside the building in the quiet courtyard, a lone figure stands waiting. She lets out a soft, relieved sigh into the quiet night air. Leo and Claire get ready to move, while Clevius leads the dragon away down the hall. Leo looks back at the beast chasing Clevius and hopes their dangerous plan will succeed. He asks Claire if she truly planned on sacrificing their classmate from the very beginning. Claire smirks and insists that Clevius is far too tough to be killed so easily. She points out that Clevius is a top swordsman, capable of withstanding the monster's brutal attacks. Even when terrified, Clevius's incredible reflexes and endurance keep him alive against the beast. Meanwhile, Ed reveals that Lortel is actually the key to taking down the giant dragon. Outside the training hall, cold magical energy begins to gather around the outer stone walls. Lortel prepares to unleash her strongest magic to clear a path and blast the dragon. Dozens of giant glowing magic circles illuminate the dark walls with blinding light. Lortel smiles confidently as she channels all her magic into the massive attack. Ed reflects on how only someone as ruthless and capable as Lortel
Lortel could pull this off. Ed had trusted Lortel with this destructive task before the battle started. A blinding surge of magic energy unleashes with terrifying power. Lortel descends from the air, ready to blow everything apart. The massive magic blast crashes directly into the fortified building. Shockwaves tear through the walls and violently rip the structure open. Giant slabs of stone shatter and collapse heavily to the ground. Lortel lands gracefully amidst the swirling purple energy and debris. Phoenia and the rest of the group stare in complete disbelief. Lortel gives a confident smile and signals them to proceed immediately. She remembers previously destroying an academy roof during past combat exams. She realizes Ed chose her specifically because of her destructive reputation. A sly smirk forms on her lips as everything goes according to plan. Lortel watches from behind as the main attack group dashes forward into the building. She glances to the side with a sharp, determined look in her eyes. A sudden explosion shakes the area as danger rapidly approaches her location. Clevius runs for his life while being chased by the giant blue fire dragon. Lortel concentrates her mana, cloaking herself in a brilliant aura of blue flames. She extends her hand to cast a spell, remembering the dangerous plan Ed gave her. Clevius panics and screams for help as the massive fiery beast bears down on him. Ed sprints ahead, knowing full well that retreating is no longer an option. With blood on his face, Ed wears a resolute and focused expression. He remains firm in his conviction that they must directly destroy the fire dragon. The fearsome beast unleashes a devastating torrent of flames from its jaws. Defensive magic shields could barely withstand the creature's overwhelming firepower during their past clash. Ed clutches a mysterious pouch, instructing the others to charge up their strongest spells. The allies watch in surprise as bright magical energy begins to surge. Ed sprints across the high balcony and prepares to jump into the fray. Lortel and Ziggs dash forward across the floor to cast their support magic. Lortel thrusts her hand forward, conjuring a massive wave of solid ice. The giant wall of ice crackles loudly as it rapidly expands. Ziggs and Lortel gaze up at the towering ice structure trapping the beast. The furious dragon lets out a deafening roar within the icy prison. The dragon fiercely snaps its jaws as fiery energy blazes around its face. The massive ice barrier shatters apart under the immense heat and pressure. Ed bursts through the chaos, diving directly toward the rampaging monster. Ed plunges down from the ceiling to deliver a decisive strike. Leo catches his breath, completely exhausted from running across the chaotic academy grounds. He spots the powerful genius Lucy sound asleep on the floor. Leo turns away for a moment, trying to process the ridiculous situation. He remembers the game map showing how to assemble an attack squad. The walkthrough guide explicitly stated where allies like Lucy could be recruited. Bruised and exasperated, Leo hauls the sleeping girl over his shoulder. Meanwhile, an exhausted Yennekar sits drained within a fiery blast crater. Suddenly, Belle steps forward with glowing eyes and a terrifying aura. Through all the danger and screaming, Lucy peacefully continues her nap. Lucy suddenly perks up with wide eyes when she spots a tempting snack. A fresh bundle of savory dried jerky sticks is brought out for her. Leo suddenly shoves the entire handful of jerky straight into Lucy's mouth. Leo winds his arm back with intense determination to launch a powerful throw. He lifts the speechless girl right up against the edge of the balcony railing. Leo grits his teeth tightly as he pours all his strength into the toss. He hurls Lucy directly over the balcony toward the chaotic battlefield below. Lucy plummets helplessly upside down, with her mouth still stuffed with meat. Down in the arena, the giant spirit beast unleashes a blazing burst of destructive magic. The monster's fiery attack crashes against the ground, shattering ice near the students. Lucy cries in shock as she drops headfirst into the dangerous boss fight. A blinding flash of light erupts in the courtyard right in front of the dragon. Ed leans over the balcony railing to watch the battle unfold below. A giant bolt of purple lightning crashes down directly where Lucy landed. Ed watches intently as the magical energy builds into a massive strike. The blast erupts into a towering pillar of blinding purple light. The surge of magical power continues to shoot straight into the sky. Intense purple energy radiates across the entire arena with terrifying force. The brilliant flash of light completely whitens out the surrounding area. The spirit dragon and nearby students are violently blown backward by the shockwave. Up on the balcony, Ed gets caught in the blast's fierce, rushing wind. Clevius and Elka scream in terror inside a protective barrier during the explosion. Ed grips the railing with all his strength to avoid being blown away. A fierce glare sharpens with intense magical focus. The massive dragon roars into the sky as dark energy crackles around it. Leo rushes down the grand staircase wrapped in glowing purple power. He clenches his fist tightly as raw energy gathers around his hand. With eyes blazing furiously, Leo charges ahead at full speed. Meanwhile, memories return of Yennekar being gently embraced as a child. Peers smiled while placing all of their hopes and burdens onto her. Her instructors trusted her completely, raising the bar ever higher. Everyone told her that the entire class relied only on her success. The endless pressure trapped young Yennekar in overwhelming darkness. She was forced to stand barefoot over sharp, bloody shards of glass. Despite her pain, everyone kept praising her while ignoring her suffering. A massive explosion blows the hall doors wide open with blinding light. Thick smoke and rubble blast across the room from the violent impact. The dust clears to reveal Phoenia and her allies ready for battle. Leo steps forward with his sword drawn, leading his team into the hall. Yennekar hovers before them, bound in dark chains and possessed by evil magic. A terrifying dark beast glares down at them with glowing red eyes. The massive demon looms overhead, radiating terrifying dark energy beside Yennekar. Trapped in purple chains, Yennekar stares down at her classmates with an eerie smile. The giant winged monster unfurls its wings and readies a deadly attack. Intense magic circles ignite beneath the beast, crackling with dangerous purple lightning.
The students watch in tense silence as overwhelming dark power engulfs the entire hall. Meanwhile, Ed sprints through the academy corridors, realizing the boss battle has officially started.
Leo lies bruised and battered across the floor as the desperate battle continues. Ed slides to a sudden halt, arriving just in the nick of time. The dark dragon unleashes a massive torrent of purple flames across the room. Ed watches from behind as the chaos and destruction unfold before his eyes. Leo and Anise look up in surprise when they notice Ed standing near them. Clevius screams in panic as he is launched high into the air by the blast. Nearby, Lucy naps peacefully inside a protective magical sphere, ignoring the surrounding danger completely. Ed grabs Leo and instructs the exhausted students to let him take over. Clevius clutches his head in absolute terror, crying frantically for help. Anise stares at Ed in disbelief, startled by his sudden appearance. She sighs quietly, wondering if they can really place their trust in him. Ed calmly steps forward to face the rampaging dragon, while Anise watches him take charge. Ed looks back with a calm smile, fully prepared to take down the monster. Anise smirks knowingly, trusting Ed to finish the fight. She channels her mana, lighting up a glowing blue magic circle beneath her hand. Anise unleashes massive, sharp ice crystals that float menacingly around her. Frost magic crackles across the ground around her feet. Ed takes a firm step forward to confront the flaming beast. Ed leaps into action as Clevius tumbles backwards in total panic. Clevius crashes onto the floor, screaming in terror. The dark dragon unleashes an ear-splitting roar full of rage. The beast opens its massive jaws wide, showing its sharp fangs. A terrifying blast of purple flame gathers deep inside the monster's mouth. Ed leaps straight toward the towering beast as dark purple energy surges around it. A sudden burst of dark force tears violently through the air. The massive impact sends Ed flying backward high into the air. Flames of purple energy rage violently across the battlefield below him. Ed quickly gathers glowing green wind magic in his hand to steady himself. He grits his teeth through the pain, preparing to counterattack. His sharp gaze locks firmly onto the enemy with intense focus. Suddenly, a terrifying crimson demonic arm wrapped in chains looms overhead, shocking Clevius. The massive armored blade hangs ominously over the entire battlefield. Clevius falls to his knees, paralyzed with pure terror. Ed looks back in shock, instantly recognizing the giant summoned arm. He realizes Leo and his friends have finally launched their decisive final attack. Ed realizes the giant demonic arm in the sky will distract everyone in the fight. The shadow monster opens its glowing jaws to unleash another massive energy blast. Ed shields his face as the destructive purple wave rushes straight toward him. Suddenly, a sharp wave of frost slams into the beam and shatters it. A blast of ice completely freezes and disperses the monster's attack. Laura steps forward fiercely, casting powerful ice spells to support Ed. Laura lands firmly on the ground, ready to keep pressing the offensive. The shadow monster blinks its glowing eye, startled by the sudden interference. A streak of bright energy rushes across the arena floor at high speed. Ziggs joins the fray, gathering swirling green wind magic in his hands. Ziggs leaps high above the shadow monster with glowing energy ready to strike. Ziggs glares down at the beast and prepares to unleash his wind attack. A brilliant blade of green wind magic gathers immense power. The attack reaches full force, glowing with blinding green light. Ziggs unleashes a devastating wind strike straight at the foe. The razor-sharp gale slices cleanly through the massive shadowy beast. Ziggs slides smoothly across the ground right beneath the collapsing monster. The giant fire spirit crashes heavily onto the ground in defeat. System notifications confirm that the high-ranking spirit has been slain. Ed's spirit resonance and understanding shoot up dramatically from the battle. Multiple stat increases flood his screen all at once. The victory unlocks a powerful new system skill for him. He now has the ability to form official spirit contracts. Covered in blood, Ed catches his breath and watches the battlefield carefully. A terrifying, dark presence looms high above the Magic Academy. A blinding pillar of light shoots directly into the night sky toward the monster. The massive light pierces straight into the heart of the fiery creature. A bright red shockwave washes over the Academy grounds below. Dozens of lightning-fast sword slashes slice through the massive entity. A network of glowing cuts tears across the sky, trapping the demon. The entire creature detonates in a massive, fiery explosion. Giant flaming boulders shatter and rain down from the blast. Leo falls back toward the ground, holding his sword after unleashing his attack. Exhausted from using all his energy, Leo drops unconsciously through the air. Lightning crackles across the sky as the surrounding magical barrier begins to break. The entire magical phenomenon shatters into bright dust and crumbles away. Lortel watches in awe as the massive barrier finally shatters into brilliant light above them. Ed, Ziggs, and Lucy quietly stand together, watching the remnants of the fierce battle fade away. The morning sun gently rises over the Academy grounds as peace finally returns to the campus.
Birds begin to chirp in the treetops under the warm, peaceful morning glow. The exhausted students rest against a large tree, recovering from their intense life-or-death battle. Lucy lies completely knocked out on the grass, sleeping deeply after using all her magical energy. Lortel turns to Ed with a playful smile, ready to discuss business as usual. She reaches out her bandaged hand toward Ed with a sly grin. Lortel suddenly grabs Ed's hand and drops a reward into his palm. Ed finds 3 shiny gold coins sitting right inside his open hand. Lortel playfully asks Ed what he plans to do next with his newly earned reward.
Lortel gives Ed another sly smile as she teases him about their growing connection. Ed watches her walk away, hoping to avoid getting dragged into any more messy schemes. Suddenly, Ed hears footsteps approaching from behind and turns around to look. A tired student in boots walks steadily toward Ed across the courtyard. Leo marches forward with his head lowered, clearly exhausted from the recent battle. Covered in dirt and scratches, Leo stops directly in front of Ed. Ed looks up in surprise as the Academy's hero stands quietly before him. Leo bows his head deeply to Ed in sincere gratitude under the evening sky. He admits he is in Ed's debt and thanks him for saving everyone. Nearby, Clevius suddenly begins shouting and complaining at the top of his lungs. The rest of the group turns around and shoots terrifying glares at Clevius. Lortel calmly tells Clevius to shut up and stop being so noisy. Phoenia addresses the group while Clevius sulks on the ground in the background, whimpering softly. Ed slowly pushes himself up from the tree to face the princess. Elvira leans into view with a mischievous smirk on her face. Elvira barks angrily at Ziggs while Phoenia and Ed watch their silly argument unfold. Despite being covered in scratches and blood, Ed offers everyone a warm and relieved smile. The students stand together peacefully among the rubble under the warm glow of the sunset. Leo and Clevius stand side by side, taking in the calm after the chaotic battle. Ayla smiles softly as she stands close to Leo in the evening light. Phoenia stares intently ahead, looking deep in thought about everything that just occurred. Ziggs gazes quietly into the distance, enjoying the peaceful atmosphere after the fight. Elvira flashes a playful grin as she stands beside a calm Clevius. Elvira stands quietly in the warm sunset glow, looking deep in thought. She glances back at her classmates gathered together after surviving the dangerous battle. Elvira gazes out across the peaceful academy grounds bathed in bright light. Meanwhile, Ed picks up heavy pieces of rubble in the ruined hall. He tosses the broken stones aside to clear a path through the debris. Light filters through the shattered ceiling into the destroyed building. Ed steps across the cracked floor toward a fallen wooden cabinet. The dark wooden cabinet sits quietly among the collapsed stones. With bruised hands, Ed carefully pulls open the cabinet door. His eyes widen in surprise as he peers into the darkness. A soft giggle echoes out from inside the hidden space. Inside the dark cabinet, a bruised and battered Yennekar looks up with an eerie grin.
Her clothes are tattered and covered in dust as she huddles in the cramped space. The cabinet door swings open completely, letting light spill inside. Yennekar continues staring out with a wide, unsettling smile. She quietly giggles to herself, showing how far she has slipped into madness. Ed stares down at her in shock, unable to believe what he is seeing. Elvira recalls a time when she noticed something deeply wrong with Yennekar. In a flashback, Elvira follows Yennekar down the quiet academy hallway toward her room.
She catches a brief glimpse inside Yennekar's living quarters. The room is filled with endless gift boxes and walls plastered with cheer messages. All the encouraging sticky notes had become a crushing burden of expectations on Yennekar. Surrounded by presents, Yennekar carefully picks up another gift sent by her peers. Surrounded by endless gifts and notes, Yennekar slowly broke under the crushing weight of everyone's expectations. Sensing her inner darkness, the spirit Velisper took advantage of her fragile heart. Velisper's dark power completely consumed her mind, ultimately causing her to lose control. After Leo was defeated, the students turned all their attention and overwhelming praise onto Yennekar.
Surrounded by swarming crowds, the constant pressure only pushed Yennekar deeper into despair. Meanwhile, Lucy had spent her day sleeping peacefully out in the quiet northern forest. Ed had simply been trying to survive quietly near his handmade wooden shelter. Back in the present, a bruised Ed gazes down at Yennekar with quiet concern. Curled up in the cabinet, Yennekar laughs self-deprecatingly while clutching her head. She looks at the wrecked stairs, acknowledging how wildly she rampaged across the grand hall. Looking down at the shattered floor, she bitterly notes that no one came to find her. Yennekar pulls her knees tighter, admitting she never expected anyone to actually search for her.
She forces a bittersweet smile through her pain as she continues to pour her heart out. She explains that she hid inside the cabinet just so she could cry her eyes out alone. Ed listens in silence, deeply moved by the quiet sorrow she carried for so long. Ed suddenly recalls the giant spirit wolf appearing before him with a plea to save her. Back then, he had looked up at the glowing beast in confusion over its strange request. He now realizes the spirit was desperately trying to stop Yennekar from being pushed past her breaking point. While everyone else idolized and pressured her, Ed had always treated her like a normal person. The spirit knew Ed was the only genuine shelter she could have truly leaned on. Because she had nobody to confide in, the evil demon Velisper easily ensnared her mind. Crushed by absolute loneliness, Yennekar had completely succumbed to the dark ritual. Letters and heavy academic burdens piled up on her desk, adding to the immense pressure she constantly faced. She always forced a bright smile to meet the impossible expectations everyone had for her. Even when exhausted and bruised, she felt she had to pretend everything was completely fine. Looking up, she notices someone who never asked her to carry such a heavy burden.
Ed looks down at her with a calm, gentle smile, offering quiet acceptance without any judgment. She lowers her head, overwhelmed by the sincere comfort he offers her. Outside in the sunlight, the rest of the students gather around the academy grounds. The others prepare to move forward as the crisis across the campus finally winds down. Inside the dimly lit ruins, Ed chooses to stay right beside the huddled girl. Yennekar softly begins to speak, ready to share the feelings she kept bottled up inside. A tear traces down her cheek as she finally lets her true emotions show. Colorful orbs of mystical light begin floating through the darkened chamber. A glowing spear drifts gracefully down across the ornate academy balcony. A radiant bird-like creature takes shape and flaps its luminous wings. Different glowing spirits flutter all around the ruined room in full view. Ed looks up in shock as dozens of magical spirit beasts gather around them. Yennekar continues weeping while the gentle spirits circle over her head. A glowing cat spirit stays closely by Yennekar to offer quiet comfort. Ed sees system alerts showing his spirit magic abilities reaching level 10. A message pops up stating a low-ranking fire spirit wants to form a bond. Another notification appears as a wind spirit also takes a liking to him. Then, a prominent alert informs him about a powerful high-ranking wind spirit. A giant, magnificent beast appears right before him in a flash of bright light. The giant wolf spirit, Marilda, smiles down at Ed with great interest. Meanwhile, the bright sky clears above the prestigious Magic Academy. Inside the school building, a disciplinary hearing is held to determine Yennekar's fate. Yennekar stands quietly at the podium with her head bowed in deep regret. Several angry Academy staff members shout out, demanding the harshest possible punishment. However, Princess Phoenia raises her hand to speak up and defend Yennekar. Lortel also uses her merchant guild's immense wealth and influence to intervene. With powerful figures advocating for her, the committee is forced to reach a compromise. As part of the punishment, Yennekar loses all her top student financial aid. She is also stripped of every single honorary award she previously earned. Additionally, she loses her privilege to live in the Academy's elite dormitory. Despite these heavy penalties, Yennekar is officially spared from being expelled. Her friends and teachers celebrate with pure joy after learning she avoided expulsion. Despite the good news, Yennekar sits slumped over, looking completely gloomy. Anise and Claire share a sly, knowing glance to cheer their friend up. They sit down together over tea, coffee, and delicious sweet pastries. Her friends lean forward to give Yennekar some serious romantic advice. Claire looks on with sharp, passionate determination. Anise locks eyes with equal intensity, fully backing their new plan. Together, both girls passionately motivate Yennekar to take action for her love life. Yennekar blushes deeply with sparkling eyes as she imagines being with Ed. She shyly twirls her braided hair, completely flustered by their encouragement. Claire and Anise stare in nervous disbelief as Yennekar begins telling them a story. Yennekar blushes warmly with love in her eyes as she begins sharing her secret dream. In her romantic daydream, delicate hands finish making a lovely crown of fresh flowers. Yennekar sits happily in a sunlit meadow of blooming flowers, wearing a simple dress. She suddenly hears a warm greeting and looks up in wonder. Ed appears before her dressed like a dashing prince, riding a grand white horse. Ed looks down at her with a gentle, sparkling smile. Yennekar sweetly places the handmade flower crown right onto Ed's head. The two hold hands and run happily together through the open flower fields. Back in reality, Yennekar laughs happily while her two friends sweat in total shock. Claire forces a nervous smile, completely stunned by Yennekar's innocent fairy tale fantasy. Claire suddenly remembers she has work to do and sprints away, leaving Anise behind with Yennekar. Yennekar cheerfully waves goodbye to Claire while Anise breaks into a cold, nervous sweat. Anise swallows hard, realizing she must address Yennekar's extreme romantic delusions immediately. Yennekar gazes back at Anise with an innocent and curious expression on her face. Anise puts on a sweet and reassuring smile to start giving her advice gently. Anise leans closer with a grin as Yennekar nods eagerly to her suggestions. Yennekar suddenly springs up and shouts in total embarrassment, her cheeks glowing bright red.
Yennekar rushes away in a flustered panic while Anise watches her leave from the table. Anise raises her arm and bids a cheerful farewell to the departing girl. Once Yennekar is gone, Anise immediately collapses and slams her head onto the table in exhaustion. Meanwhile, Ed stands outside under the sunny sky with his eyes closed peacefully. Ed smiles serenely, feeling completely satisfied and relaxed in the quiet outdoor air. Ed carries a box full of tools into the woods to start working. He spots Yennekar walking alone on the path, looking extremely fidgety. She blushes and taps her fingers together, feeling too shy to approach him.
Ed waves to greet her, startling her with a sudden attention. Overwhelmed with embarrassment, she panics and quickly hides behind a tree. She peeks around the trunk and nods awkwardly while Ed stares in confusion. Ed pulls a sharp blade out of his toolbox. He surveys the open clearing to prepare for his crafting task. He makes a precise cut across the surface of the wood. He diligently carves into the large log with swift, practiced motions. He carefully finishes engraving the joint marks into the timber. He stacks the cut logs together to form a sturdy wooden structure. Ed proudly checks his exam results, which show impressive grades across the board. Whenever Ed tries to approach Yennekar at school, she screams in embarrassment and runs away. Yennekar's best friends glare angrily at Ed, blaming him for making her so flustered. Back in the forest, Ed collects a neat pile of heavy logs for his construction project. He carefully assembles a sturdy wooden frame on stone foundations for his new cabin. Ed gets annoyed when he finds Lucy fast asleep on the ground tied to a rope. Belle stops by the camp carrying a basket full of fresh food and ingredients for him.
Ed's wooden structure suddenly collapses into pieces under his feet while he works on it. In town, Yennekar flees in embarrassment once again the moment she spots Ed walking nearby. Her protective friends peeve Ed another terrifying glare, growing increasingly furious with him. Later, Ziggs comes to the campsite to help Ed rebuild the cabin roof together. Working side by side with Ziggs, Ed feels relieved that his construction is finally making progress. Tally marks carved into the wood count down the remaining construction tasks. Ed carves the final tally mark into the wood to mark his progress. He sticks his dagger into the dirt and walks inside the cabin. Ed steps onto the solid wooden floor of his new home. He slumps down against the wooden wall, exhausted from all the hard labor. The sturdy roof now completely covers the cabin as evening falls. Ed smiles in satisfaction while rubbing his sore neck. The evening sky turns pink and orange over the quiet forest camp. Ed sits peacefully by the open cabin doorway to enjoy the view. Outside, Yennekar secretly peeks out from behind a tree to watch him rest. Yennekar clutches her hands nervously as she watches Ed from behind a tree. She takes a deep breath, trying to summon the courage to approach him. Inside his new cabin, Ed happily sprawls out on the wooden floor to rest. Suddenly, a loud crash outside startles Ed out of his peaceful break. Ed looks over and finds Lucy fast asleep on top of his wooden structure. Just then, Ed turns around after hearing another unexpected noise in the woods. Yennekar steps out of the forest and waves awkwardly to greet him.
Ed stares back at her, completely puzzled by her sudden appearance. Yennekar lets out a nervous laugh, blushing as she tries to hide her embarrassment. Later, a maid gently brushes through Yennekar's long hair while mentioning her recent visit. Belle mentions visiting Ed's camp, making Yennekar flustered as she tries to act casual. Belle praises Ed's craftsmanship and remarks on how impressed she was by the cabin. Yennekar listens quietly, trying to hide her flustered feelings while getting her hair brushed. Belle mentions that she was curious to check out the inside of the shelter too. Yennekar blushes bright red, realizing Belle felt the exact same urge she did. She whispers to herself, desperately trying to rationalize her intense curiosity as totally normal. Her eyes sparkle with sudden joy now that she has an excuse for her behavior. In a memory, Yennekar flails her arms and shouts excuses in front of Ed's cabin. Ed scratches his head in confusion at Yennekar's strange and energetic outburst. Yennekar stammers nervously as she recalls the real reason she visited him. She gets distracted reminiscing about Ed looking surprisingly attractive and handsome. She clearly remembers his impressive muscular physique and defined build from their encounter. Her spirit familiars panic around her as she gets lost in her flustered thoughts.
Belle puts on a serious face like an investigator writing a daily report. She nods calmly, claiming she rarely speaks to the spirits anyway. Yennekar laughs awkwardly as blood drips from her nose in embarrassment. She suddenly recalls the moment Ed invited her to step inside. In her memory, Ed smiled warmly at her during the golden sunset. Ed casually gestured for her to enter his newly built camp. Yennekar had stared back at him with wide, blushing eyes. She happily accepted his invitation with a bright, radiant smile. While Lucy slept peacefully on the roof, Yennekar marveled at Ed's handiwork. Night soon fell, and a bright campfire crackled in the darkness. Yennekar held a hot mug of tea warmly in her hands. Sitting by the fire, Yennekar quietly expressed how deeply grateful she felt toward everyone. Ed gazes quietly at Yennekar as she drinks her warm tea by the fire. While Ed tends to the campfire, Yennekar watches him with a surprised and touched expression. Ed reflects on how genuinely kind and selfless Yennekar has always been. In the past, Yennekar stood alone in her room, buried under endless gifts and favors. Her room was constantly piled high with presents and request notes from students relying on her. She had become completely overwhelmed by the constant expectations placed upon her shoulders. Yet, she always put on a cheerful smile and accepted everyone's requests without complaining. Ed realizes that this non-stop burden to please others has slowly exhausted her spirit. Sitting beside the flames, Yennekar quietly stares into her warm cup with a weary look. Her eyes glow softly in the firelight as she listens to Ed speak. Ed tells her that she can simply relax here in peace without anyone asking anything of her. Hearing his considerate words, Yennekar smiles with genuine comfort and relief. Yennekar smiles warmly, deeply touched by Ed's thoughtful and comforting words. The two sit together peacefully beside the crackling campfire in the quiet woods. Ed turns his head in surprise when Yennekar speaks up. She happily promises to visit often and gives him a sweet smile. She hugs her knees, feeling completely relaxed and safe in his camp. Ed smiles back, glad that he can provide her with a comfortable refuge. He looks back toward the fire, quietly contemplating the upcoming events. They spend the rest of the night enjoying the peaceful warmth under the starry sky. Later, heavy rain pours over the academy as a new day begins. Attention shifts to a legendary magical artifact known as the Sage's Sealed Tome. This ancient book contains celestial magic capable of altering the world's natural laws. Lortel lowers her hood and carefully inspects the glowing tome inside the glass case. She smirks slyly, noting that the magical artifact looks extremely valuable. With her arms crossed, she quietly ponders her next clever move. Meanwhile, back at the forest camp, the campfire crackles warmly in the night. Ed and Yennekar sit together peacefully beside the glowing flames. Ed thinks to himself about the difficult trials Leo will soon have to face. He wears a calm smile as he reflects on the future. Across the academy grounds, lightning flashes through the dark, stormy sky. Heavy rain pours relentlessly over the silent campus buildings. Dark memories of past conflicts begin to linger over the school. A mysterious horse-drawn wagon travels slowly down a muddy forest path in the downpour. An injured student clutches his arm in pain while cornered in the pouring rain. Angry students raise their fists outside the hall in the pouring rain. A growing crowd of protesters gathers with burning torches to demand changes. Meanwhile, someone reviews an official proposal concerning the student dormitories. A confidential letter is carefully stamped with a wax seal. Lortel watches the heavy downpour from her window with a sly smile. A shadowy figure prepares to put their secret scheme into motion. The sealed envelope rests quietly on the wooden desk. A stern student wearing glasses stands resolutely in the rain. He watches coldly as the enraged mob of students chant around him. The important letter sits waiting to be sent across campus. Belle and the dormitory maid stand ready to face the impending trouble. The furious crowd of students rushes forward into the stormy night. A dropped torch ignites flammable oil spilled across the floor inside the building. Fierce flames instantly roar to life, spreading quickly against the walls. The blazing fire sweeps through the hallway, threatening to consume everything around it. Meanwhile, the Academy elders sit in tense silence as the campus descends into chaos. A mysterious cloaked figure channels glowing blue mana into a legendary sealed tome. Outside, cold rain continues pouring relentlessly across the stormy night sky. Lortel stands alone by a large window, quietly watching the downpour. She looks up at the looming dark buildings towering over the Academy grounds. Lortel slowly lifts her hand to touch the cold glass pane. Her reflection stares back with an anxious and troubled expression. She gazes into the dark rain, deeply worried about the unfolding crisis. Behind her, stacks of handwritten letters and secret documents cover the desk. Lortel stares quietly out at the stormy night. Her sharp eyes reflect the gloomy rain beating against the window. Meanwhile, someone with soaking wet shoes steps softly across the floor. A cloaked figure walks alone down the dark Academy hallway. Back in her room, Lortel places her hand against the glass in solitude. Her secret papers and tea sit untouched on the desk in the dark. She reaches out her hand toward the cold rain outside. A sinister shadow with glowing red eyes looms right behind her window. She takes her seat in the dark, composed and ready. Outside in the storm, an angry student raises a fist in fury. A massive crowd of students begins shouting and protesting in the pouring rain. A hooded student rallies the crowd to demand justice from the Academy. A nervous maid freezes in fear as the cloaked intruder sneaks up right behind her. The hooded intruder quickly throws a cloth bag over the maid's head. He hoists the struggling maid over his shoulder and carries her away. Suddenly, someone kicks open a heavy door with powerful force. The large doors burst wide open into the stormy night. The protesting students outside gasp in surprise as the building entrance suddenly opens. The angry crowd rallies together, pumping their fists and shouting their demands. The cloaked intruder steps out into the rain, carrying the captured hostage. He stands silently facing the crowd as the protesters shout their plan. A student wearing glasses looks closely at the hooded figure in confusion. The mysterious figure shifts slightly as his hood begins to slip.
Ed stands, drenched in the pouring rain, looking somberly at the crowd before him. Draped in his soaked cloak, he remains completely motionless under the heavy storm. His exhausted face reveals the heavy toll of everything that just took place. He stares quietly through the rain with a calm and serious expression. He braces himself under the downpour, ready to face whatever comes next. Despite his lingering exhaustion, his mind stays clear and determined. Sometime later, the heavy storm finally clears away into a bright, sunny day. Ed checks his combat status screen to review his current archery skills. Kneeling on the ground, he checks animal footprints beside some scattered berries.
Hiding behind a large tree, Ed keeps watch for any prey wandering nearby. He quietly sets an arrow against his bow while staying completely out of sight. Raising his bow, Ed takes careful aim at a deer grazing in the clearing. Ed suddenly senses someone nearby and pauses his hunt in complete surprise. Belle casually strolls past the deer while politely bowing as she carries her basket. Next, Ziggs jogs through the forest while finishing his intense shirtless workout. Ed tries to focus his aim again, but another student stares right at him. High above the trees, a massive blast of pink magic cuts through the sky. Lucy floats down effortlessly from above, surrounded by a bright purple magical aura. She activates a glowing magic ring to land gently outside Ed's cabin porch. Lucy immediately peeks through the window with excited, sparkling eyes to greet Ed. An annoyed Ed promptly shoves her right back out of the open window. Lucy pops right back up to lecture him while Ed stares in complete exhaustion. The peaceful morning sun continues to shine brightly over the wooden roof of the cabin. Yennekar arrives with a bright smile, happily presenting a large bowl of fresh eggs. Yennekar steps into a wooden tub to wash laundry with her bare feet. She hums happily while holding up her skirt to clean the clothes. She continues stomping the wet laundry with a cheerful spirit. Ed watches her work and finds himself caught off guard by the sight. When Ed compliments her, Yennekar quickly turns away in total embarrassment. Her face darkens slightly as her thoughts drift deeper into her feelings.
Later that night, the full moon rises high over the quiet forest. Footsteps step carefully into the camp near stray arrows on the ground. Lortel emerges from the trees with her maid Belle following close behind. She strides confidently forward into the moonlit clearing.
Lortel gives Ed a sly, charming smile. Holding his bow, Ed groans in frustration at yet another late-night visitor.
Lortel tells Ed the news while Belle quietly stands behind her in the dark woods. Ed's eye widens in sharp surprise and anger at the sudden news. Ed leans down intensely into Lortel's face and demands to know why Ziggs fainted. In a flashback, an arrogant student loudly mocks Leo and Ayla in the academy hallway. The rude student continues shouting nasty insults in front of the gathered crowd. The bully loudly yells that Leo's even more useless than Ed himself. Suddenly, a powerful fist crashes directly into the loud student's face. The heavy blow lands cleanly across his jaw, instantly cutting off his shouts.
Ziggs charges forward in pure fury while the shocked bystanders back away in fear. The insolent student falls to the hallway floor, completely knocked out cold. Ziggs screams in uncontrolled rage, showing an angry side no one had ever seen before. Lortel explains it was unclear whether Ziggs was standing up for Leo or defending Ed. She reminds Ed of the secret instructions she gave him in the forest while Belle waited nearby. Lortel had offered him a massive reward with a sly, confident smirk. At the time, Ed had endured endless gossip and scorn from his fellow students. Lortel directly challenged Ed, asking if he was willing to go against the entire academy.
Her sharp, calculating eyes locked onto him with absolute seriousness. Ed looked stunned by the sheer audacity of her dangerous proposal. Lortel offered a warm smile, waiting patiently for his response. Ed took her hand, sealing their secret partnership with a firm handshake. Back in the present, Ed sits calmly reading a book beside his crackling campfire in the rain. Tensions rapidly escalate into a standoff between Phoenia's student council and Lortel's faction. A full-scale conflict begins between the prestigious academy and the wealthy merchant guild. Ed peacefully flips through his notebook by the warm campfire. Yennekar steps under the canopy, wringing rain from her soaked uniform. She shakes off the wet chill and walks closer to the fire. Both of them sit comfortably around the fire while heavy rain falls outside. Yennekar brightly asks him if camp life is full of fun and interesting work. Ed looks at her, caught off guard by her cheerful, sunny attitude. He softens up and gives her a warm, genuine smile. Yennekar happily stretches her arms into the air, completely enjoying the peaceful moment. Suddenly, both of them stop talking when they hear a sound above them. Ed glances up and spots someone standing directly on top of the shelter roof. Lucy stands quietly in the pouring rain, wearing her large witch hat. Rain pours around Lucy as she balances silently on the roof edge. Yennekar beams with excitement, but Ed politely tries to calm her down. Yennekar listens intently with a curious expression as Ed continues speaking. In the academy hallway, powerful magical seals glow brightly across every closed door. Ed speaks with a serious tone, planning out his next careful move. Sitting across from her by the warm fire, Ed asks Yennekar for a favor. Ed asks her to meet him later at the Rose Garden outside of Fellis Hall. Ed sits calmly, preparing to explain the critical situation to her in private. Thinking it sounds like a romantic date, Yennekar blushes furiously and covers her face. Ed remains completely focused on his plan to investigate the dangerous hall. Overwhelmed with excitement, Yennekar springs to her feet as Ed watches in confusion. Yennekar dashes happily into the pouring rain, leaving Ed utterly speechless. Ed lets out an exhausted sigh as he watches her run away into the storm. Ed sits quietly by the warm campfire, watching the heavy rain pour down. Across the academy grounds, the storm completely covers the tall dormitories. Inside his room, Ziggs trains his body through difficult one-armed handstands. Dripping with sweat, Ziggs pushes himself hard to grow even stronger. He finally drops down and lands firmly on his bare feet. Catching his breath, Ziggs gazes out into the dark, rainy night. Meanwhile, a hooded intruder races swiftly across the drenched academy courtyard. The cloaked figure approaches Fellis Hall with intense determination. A cooperating maid discreetly opens an entrance to let the intruder inside. The head maid gathers all the building staff into a single meeting room. Following Lortel's secret buyout, the staff are locked inside the room. The maid then leads the cloaked intruder through the empty hallways. A bucket of cleaning water sits quietly on the carpet inside the hallway. The cloaked intruder stands in silence as loud footsteps echo outside.
Outside, dark clouds gather over the massive dormitory in the evening rain. A raised fist pumps into the stormy air as loud chanting begins. An angry mob of students gathers in the rain, shouting furiously together. Dozens of protesting students surround the dormitory while holding bright torches. The massive crowd lets out a deafening roar into the rainy night. Students wearing red armbands yell out their anger toward the elite dorm.
A hooded student wearing glasses pumps his fist and leads the protest. The mob surges forward together, determined to storm the building. Several student rioters sprint directly toward the locked front entrance. Suddenly, the giant front doors unlock and swing wide open from inside. The angry students stop in surprise as they notice someone emerging from the main doors. The protesters shout loudly in the rain, raising their fists as the doorway lights up. A hooded intruder carrying a tied-up hostage suddenly steps out into the bright opening. The nervous intruder with glasses freezes in shock when he sees who is waiting for him.
Ed stares back calmly in the rain, revealing that he was expecting this exact situation. Standing silently in his dark raincoat, Ed prepares to take control of the chaotic scene. The captive struggles on the ground while the panicked student tries to explain himself to Ed. Ed places a calm hand on Will's shoulder and gives him simple instructions to follow. Will trembles with deep emotion as Ed shows him unexpected kindness and patience. Overcome with gratitude, Will looks at Ed with teary eyes and renewed respect. Ed immediately pushes the emotional student forward, telling him to stop wasting time and move. Ed gives a confident nod as Will hardens his resolve and gets ready for action. Belle sprints frantically down the corridor, her maid cap flying off in the rush. The quiet hallway is left empty, marked only by wet footprints along the floor. Glowing magical wards activate and lock the doors as worried voices echo from inside. Ed walks down the corridor, setting up protective magic seals on every doorway. Ed turns his head with a sharp, focused glare as he senses an intruder. A pair of wet shoes steps into the dark hall, dripping water everywhere. Lortel stands at the entrance wearing a soaked hooded cloak with a gentle smile. Ed keeps his guard up as the hooded visitor walks closer along the carpet. Rainwater drips steadily from her soaked shoes with each step she takes. Ed stares intently at the girl, trying to figure out her intentions. Lortel stands calmly in front of him, greeting him quietly in the shadows. Lortel calmly walks past Ed, leaving wet footprints along the carpeted hallway. The two students pass each other on the stairs while casually exchanging parting words. Suddenly, Lortel halts her steps on the staircase. Ed glances over his shoulder, wondering why she stopped walking. Ed turns his head slightly, preparing to hear what she has to say. Ed bluntly admits his own practical and selfish approach to survival. Lortel laughs softly, amused to find someone who shares her pragmatic mindset. Her thoughts drift back to the harsh path she had to walk to survive. In a flashback, young Lortel runs terrified through an alley while chased by an angry man. As a starving orphan on the streets, she had to do whatever it took to stay alive. Later, as a merchant, she coldly burned contract papers in front of a weeping family. Through it all, money and ruthless ambition became her only trusted allies. Gold coins tumble through the darkness, symbolizing the ruthless wealth she pursued. She built her entire life around accumulating power and money. Lortel climbed a mountain of gold, leaving defeated competitors buried beneath her. Her thoughts snap back to reality as the memory fades away. Back in the present, Lortel's face remains calm and serious. She speaks up and calls Ed's name from the stairs. Ed pauses on the steps below and looks back up at her. Rain continues to fall heavily against the dark window of the building. Ed waits silently in the dim hallway to hear her words. Lortel looks down at him, ready to ask an important question. Ed stares back with an intense, determined look in his eyes. The two linger in the quiet hall, sharing a silent understanding of survival. Lortel's lips curl into a gentle, knowing smile. She turns around with a warm grin before departing. Ed watches her leave as quiet footsteps echo through the messy hall. Ed slumps down into an empty chair, catching his breath. He rests his tired legs after the long, grueling encounter. Ed raises his eyes, his focus returning to the impending danger. Elsewhere, a bright red magic seal crackles to life with raw power. A student screams as intense red energy erupts violently around him. The dangerous aura spreads across the floor with every heavy step.
Meanwhile, Ed raises his arms high to stretch out his stiffness. He sits alone in the middle of the ruined hall, preparing himself. Outside, heavy rain pours relentlessly over the dark academy towers. Outside, heavy rain pours down all over the academy's quiet rose garden. An ornate horse carriage arrives through the stormy night. Yennekar sits under a gazebo looking out into the rain. She stays sheltered under the roof, waiting patiently by herself. She remembers the handwritten note asking her to wait for him. Yennekar blushes brightly, feeling thrilled by the thought of meeting him. The storm continues to drench the academy grounds without stopping.
Even in the severe rain, she refuses to leave the rose garden. Marilda leans close to whisper and tease the flustered girl. Meanwhile, Belle and Laura make their way through the dark woods. The elemental spirits shake their heads at Yennekar's hopeless devotion. Rain falls heavily through the dark night over the academy garden. Yennekar sits alone inside the gazebo, surrounded by small glowing spirit flowers. She gently touches her hair clip, suddenly feeling anxious about Ed. Worried that something is wrong, she decides she should go check on him. Heavy rain pours relentlessly down onto the garden's blooming red roses.
Yennekar pulls up her cloak hood and dashes through the storm toward the building. Meanwhile, the storm rages around the tall tower of Ophelis Hall. Leo, Clevius, and Elvira gather outside in rain cloaks to discuss their plan. Elvira shouts furiously at the thought of damaging expensive equipment inside. Leo laughs nervously while Clevius cowers in terror next to him. Elvira glows with furious red magic, ready to blast through anyone in her way. Elvira readies a floating ring of explosive alchemy potions around herself. She charges forward in the rain while Leo and Clevius frantically follow behind. Determined to reach her room, she angrily vows to break through anyone in their way.
With a powerful kick, she bursts straight through the front entrance. Her eyes widen as she spots someone waiting inside the dim entryway. Amidst the scattered debris, Ed sits quietly on a chair beneath the broken chandelier. The trio stops in their tracks, surprised to find Ed blocking the hallway. Ed looks up at them with a cold, intense gaze. He remains perfectly still and composed, showing no signs of backing down. Leo immediately steps forward, raising his arm to shield the others. Elvira narrows her eyes, realizing Ed is deliberately standing guard. Dozens of muddy footprints on the carpet show that many students have already passed through. The grand staircase sits quiet and dim, leading deeper into the dark building. Ed sits calmly in the wrecked hallway, blocking the path of Leo, Claire, and Elvira. Elvira gives a confident smirk, while Leo and Claire look at Ed in surprise. Ed leans forward on his chair, quietly assessing the trio in front of him. Elvira stands firmly in front, keeping her focus entirely on Ed. Ed raises his head, staring them down with sharp and glowing blue eyes. Elvira flashes a wicked grin, excited to take on such a serious challenge. Ed rests his hands together, remaining completely composed and unfazed. Elvira throws off her cape as the three students prepare to attack. Leo firmly grasps his weapon, shouting a warning as tension peaks. Ed waits silently in the shadows, completely unbothered by their hostility. A heavy step lands on the floor as the confrontation begins. Leo charges aggressively toward Ed while the rest of the team follows closely behind him. Leo swiftly swings his blade forward as he closes the distance. Ed calmly raises his hand and uses wind magic to launch debris at Leo. Leo slices clean through the flying desk with his glowing sword. Without slowing down for a second, Leo charges straight through the shattered debris.
Ayla watches the intense clash with an anxious expression. Ziggs steps up and gathers swirling green wind magic in his hand. Ziggs prepares to support the front line with his ranged magical attacks. Ziggs locks his sharp gaze onto Ed. Ziggs raises his arm high to release his concentrated spill. A blinding flash of green light fills the entire hallway. A massive wave of green wind magic crashes downward across the area. The sharp blade of green wind slices cleanly through the dark ceiling. The attack cuts directly through the heavy iron chains holding up the chandelier. The massive chandelier breaks loose and plummets downward with terrifying speed.
Leo looks up just in time to see the heavy object falling straight at him. His eyes widen in pure shock as danger drops right on top of him. The giant chandelier smashes into the floor with a deafening crash. The powerful blast throws Leo flying backward through the air. The tremendous shockwave echoes through the corridors, startling the entire building. Hearing the violent explosion, Clevius curls up and shakes in utter terror. Through the swirling smoke, Leo calls out to check on Ayla. Ayla grinds her teeth against the harsh wind and tells him she is fine. Suddenly, Ayla notices something unexpected happening right in front of her.
A sharp blade of wind whips past, slicing clean through a lock of hair. The severed strand floats through the air as the violent gust rushes by. Ayla freezes in sheer terror after the attack barely misses her face. Nearby, Elvira stumbles through the smoke and watches the chaos unfold. Her pouch suddenly bursts open, scattering several magic potions across the floor. Elvira grits her teeth in panic, knowing how dangerous the spilled liquids are. The entire room continues to shake violently as heavy debris crashes down. She looks across the ruined hall, realizing the battle is getting completely out of hand.
Her eyes dart down anxiously toward one particular flask rolling away. Multiple volatile chemical bottles lie dangerously exposed amidst the scattered rubble. Elvira drops to her knees and desperately reaches out to stop the rolling container. Meanwhile, through the rising cloud of smoke, the intense duel continues without pause. Sudden bursts of fiery magic erupt violently, knocking Elvira off balance across the floor. She desperately pulls back as streaks of blazing heat scorch the ground beneath her. Nearby, the dropped explosive potion begins to flare up dangerously. Ed stands calmly amid the roaring inferno and the shattered wreckage of the room. Ayla sits frozen in shock as raging streams of fire cut across the carpet. Elvira crouches low, sweating nervously as she realizes how out of control everything has become. Through the blazing heat, Ed grips his arm and gathers his inner magical energy. With a sharp, glowing glare, Ed braces his arm to unleash his power. He stands resolute among the dancing flames, ready to take control. Flames continue to consume the hall while Ed watches the destruction carefully. Trapped by the expanding ring of fire, Ayla trembles helplessly on the floor. Elvira grits her teeth, determined to fight back as the Academy's top alchemy student.
She clutches her arm in frustration, struggling against the intense heat of the blazing inferno. She remembers how alchemists normally depend on special emergency items and magical potions. Most students always carry protective charms and enchanted rings just in case danger strikes. Elvira realizes with deep regret that her own arrogance left her completely unprepared without backup tools. Across the fiery wreckage, Ed's calm silhouette looms quietly through the roaring flames. Elvira is stunned to realize Ed calculated every single move of this confrontation beforehand. She pieces together how Ed dropped the heavy chandelier to trap everyone inside. A look of genuine shock crosses Elvira's face as she understands his deadly tactical trap.
She scrambles backward across the burning floor, trying desperately to find a safe opening. Elvira glares fiercely through the smoke, refusing to let an outcast defeat her. Ed steps forward wrapped in protective wind magic, ready to end the battle immediately. Ed gathers glowing green magic in his palm while standing amidst the raging flames. Elvira quickly pulls a glowing blue orb out of her jacket pocket. She angrily throws the orb forward to unleash her summoning magic. A small winged creature bursts out as the glass orb shatters. Elvira casts magic circles over her summon to give it strength and fire resistance.
The creature leaps upward toward the ceiling above the raging fire. It rapidly transforms into a giant beast and smashes through the heavy barriers. Claire watches in panic and reaches out her hand in total shock. The massive burning wreckage crashes down violently into the room. Claire covers her head and crouches on the floor to avoid the falling debris. A ferocious wave of wind magic swirls directly into the explosion of fire. Blinding blasts of energy tear wildly across the entire battlefield. Claire cries out in absolute terror as the dangerous magical clash continues around her. Swirling gusts of wind surround Claire as she desperately tries to keep her balance. A blazing crescent of golden fire arcs fiercely across the burning room. The fiery blast sweeps through the chamber with immense, overwhelming force. Claire braces herself while Leo swings his glowing magical sword with full force. Leo fiercely strikes downward, channeling brilliant energy through his golden blade. Out of breath, Claire stares in fear at the relentless enemy pressing them hard. Violent waves of wind magic slice across the hall, forcing Claire further back. Leo propels himself through the burning air, struggling against the enemy's crushing power. Mid-air, Leo turns his head in sudden shock as someone else enters the fight. Elvira leaps directly into the battle with a fierce and furious shout. Elvira thrusts her hand forward, commanding her summoned beasts into battle. A giant white beast charges headfirst past Elvira into the fiery hall. The massive creature roars violently as it lunges forward through the flames. A second dark beast leaps aggressively alongside it into the blazing inferno.
Leo dives forward through the swirling flames to back up the attack. Leo pushes through his exhaustion, determined to finish what he started. Leo plants his feet firmly and grips his dagger with fierce determination. Elvira smiles with approval as she watches Leo's relentless fighting spirit. Elvira swirls her cloak around, unleashing another burst of magical energy. Elvira sprints directly toward the enemy at full speed. Claire watches in sheer panic as Elvira rushes into the dangerous flames. Another massive summon dives fiercely through the fiery vortex from above. Flames burn fiercely across the room, crackling against the burning fabric. Elvira smirks happily as she rubs a glowing potion bottle against her cheek. She crouches on the burning floor, searching through her wide collection of alchemy flasks. Meanwhile, Leo gathers glowing green wind magic in his palm behind the summoned beast. A brilliant green flash erupts across the burning room as Leo channels his spell. He thrusts his hand forward, unleashing a swirling vortex of wind magic. Leo casts a sharp wind slash that cuts through the fiery inferno. A massive wave of green wind blasts outward, sweeping through the flames. Elvira watches from behind as the wind spell clears a path through the fire. She focuses her attention back onto the special brew in her hands. Elvira gently kisses the glowing green flask, fully confident in her creation.
With a fierce glare, she winds up her arm to throw the potion forward. Elvira hurls her glowing potion bottle high into the air. Leo strikes the flying bottle with a precise wind slash. The sharp green energy cuts cleanly through the target. The glass bottle shatters completely upon impact. Glowing shards scatter everywhere as the special mixture is unleashed. A massive burst of magical blue mist explodes across the hall. The shockwave expands outward, filling the entire room with neutralizing mist. Yennekar stares at her hand in shock as her magical power weakens. The blazing inferno surrounding the room is quickly extinguished by the blast.
The neutralized flames vanish, leaving only cold smoke behind. A massive beast stands bleeding heavily from a blade stuck in its back. Leo lands firmly beside the staggering creature, ready to strike again. The wounded beast crashes heavily onto the floor, completely defeated. Covered in blood and scratches, Ed stares calmly ahead at the chaos. Despite his battered body, Ed stands ready to make his next move. He remains steady in the dark, preparing for the final clash. Yennekar and Leo glare with intense determination as the climax approaches. Both of them scream out in fury as the battle reaches its peak. Ed suddenly sprints across the burning room past the fallen beast. Leo rushes right behind him, ready to strike with his sword. Ed reaches out and firmly grabs a large wooden cabinet. He pushes the massive cabinet over, sending it crashing to the floor. Leo swings his blade violently through the air to attack. A bucket of glowing yellow liquid spills out rapidly across the floor. The spilled liquid quickly spreads across the hot floorboards and begins reacting. It suddenly ignites into a blinding burst of crackling light. A massive wave of bright fire rushes upward through the room. Leo stands ready with his sword drawn amidst the sudden blaze. Leo looks back as he realizes Ed created an opening to strike. He tightens his grip on his sword with complete determination. He focuses all his energy to deliver a decisive blow. Leo charges forward at full speed with his blade glowing bright. He propels himself through the air to land a heavy strike. Elvira suddenly notices how Ed planned out the entire battlefield. She sees the windows were left open so the toxic smoke could escape. All the dangerous items around the room were already tucked away safely. Elvira suddenly realizes that even this fiery explosion is part of Ed's calculated battle strategy. Leo shouts loudly as he rushes forward, swinging his flaming sword with full power. Despite being badly wounded and covered in blood, Ed turns around holding a bow. Ed firmly plants his foot on the floor to stabilize his shooting stance amid the flames. Elvira screams out in panic as she realizes what Ed is about to do. Ed draws back his bowstring and locks his sharp gaze onto his charging opponent. Ed grips his bow tightly with bloodied hands, preparing for the perfect shot. Leo continues to dash forward rapidly, aiming to strike Ed down with his blade. Ed holds his aim steady without flinching as Leo closes in on him. Leo is surprised to see Ed using a bow, but he refuses to stop his assault. Leo's eye widens in absolute shock as he senses immediate, overwhelming danger. Ed releases the bowstring and fires a blazing high-speed arrow straight toward Leo. The fiery arrow flies right past Leo, speeding toward Ayla at the back of the room. Leo is completely stunned to realize that Ed was never aiming at him. Ayla gasps in sheer terror as the blazing projectile hurtles directly toward her. The glowing arrow streaks cleanly right between Ayla's legs without harming her. Leo worries because Ayla is currently too weak to cast any defensive magic. Sparks of blue electricity suddenly begin crackling across a pair of outstretched hands. Ayla's eyes widen in utter shock as magic erupts right behind her. Ayla decks and shields her head while a crackling electric barrier catches the arrow. Bright blue lightning surges along the floor and illuminates the entire room. Behind Ayla, someone holds a glowing magical sphere tightly against the ground. Claire kneels on the floor, panting heavily from the intense strain of casting the spell. The arrow safely comes to a halt right in front of Claire and her barrier orb. A magical artifact allows the user to instantly pull any small visible object into their hand. Elvira suddenly notices something unusual about the arrow Claire managed to block. She realizes the arrowhead was covered in cloth, proving Ed was holding back the whole time. Elvira screams out in shock as she tries to warn her teammate about Ed's intentions.
Leo lunges forward with a glowing sword strike that crashes heavily against Ed's guard. Leo keeps pushing forward aggressively, trying to overpower Ed in a fierce blade lock. Despite taking heavy hits, Ed stays focused and waits for the right moment. Ed glances upward toward the upper floor, waiting for his planned distraction. Suddenly, a panicked Clevius screams hysterically as he loses control of his berserk power. Clevius plunges down from the ceiling, engulfed in a furious burst of dark energy. Ed closes his eyes in relief, knowing his setup has finally succeeded. A massive explosive blast erupts across the battlefield, hurling Ed backward through the air.
Leo rushes forward as the smoke clears to check on the aftermath. Elvira watches in complete shock at the sudden, violent turn of events. Ed lies slumped against a deeply cracked stone wall, bloody and bruised. He remains battered on the floor, barely able to move his injured body. The entire room lies in flaming ruins with broken furniture scattered everywhere. Leo storms over and furiously grabs Ed tightly by his shirt collar. Elvira watches closely, growing increasingly suspicious of Ed's strange behavior. She remembers how calmly Ed was sitting and waiting for their arrival earlier. She recalls his seasoned combat skills and effortless magic casting during the battle. She realizes that something about his true motives makes absolutely no sense. Leo angrily demands answers while holding the bloody and exhausted Ed. Frustrated, Leo roughly drops Ed back down onto the cracked stone floor. Leo stands completely stunned as Elvira's sharp words sink into his head. Outside the towering building, heavy rain pours endlessly into the dark night. Ed quietly glances up through the blood running down his weary face. An agitated Elvira pushes past Leo and Laura to confront Ed directly. Elvira screams furiously into Ed's face, demanding to know why he pushed himself so far. Ed simply stares back at her with a calm and resolute gaze. Elvira grinds her teeth in pure frustration, glaring angrily into his eyes. Suddenly, the heavy double doors at the entrance slowly begin to creak open. The massive doorway swings open further, casting a beam of light across the floor. A soaking wet figure lowers her hood, revealing braided hair and a flower clip. Wet footsteps step onto the carpet, leaving dripping puddles of rainwater behind. As Leo raises his fist to hit Ed again, the unexpected arrival suddenly interrupts them. Elvira quickly wraps her arms around the injured Ed to support him. Leo suddenly freezes, looking up with total shock and confusion.
Yennekar looms over them with glowing red eyes, radiating intense and terrifying anger.
That's where we'll stop for now, but the story keeps going. If you want part 2, drop a like and tell me in the comments. Thanks for watching and subscribe so you don't miss it.